Hello, welcome to a very special episode of Waiting for Game. I'm your host, Gimme That Wheat. You might know me from ooh, commentating Panda Cup events. Ooh, go. and oh god, MPGR. Jeez, maybe not the right time for this. Um, but yeah, I mean, we've got a lot to talk about here. We've got some great guests. And of course, before we can get to them, I have to get to one of the most knowledgeable men in Smash, Edwin Budding. Edwin, are you going to say hi or something? This is a audio medium.
I have so many things that I want to talk about. I have so many thoughts that I need to share in the world, but I don't think the audience cares about any of that. I want to get into the two people who I trust more than anyone to explain just what is happening in the scene. Aiden, Blur, I don't know where to start from. I'm gonna flip a coin in my head. Aiden, I need you to help me make sense of what is going on in the community right now. Is Melee dying? Are we going to still have tournaments? If I plug in a CRT and a GameCube, are the cops going to show up at my door? Is the FBI going to knock down? Aiden, help me. Help me understand.
How many
Please.
how many cups of espresso did you have before this?
Dude, it's East Coast time too. Damn.
I'm scared.
He's gonna be up all night.
You're gonna if you're going to main stage this week, I'm gonna be there also. I'm gonna be at the same volume.
I'll
I'm up
be
here.
entering doubles with Bonfire. So
Nice. I'm entering with Chape.
nice. I didn't even know Chape was going.
You
That's
guys are
great.
getting these good teammates? I need to figure out what you guys' network is like.
I think you got that. I don't think the Chape thing got through. You guys talked about it. That wasn't official. Whatever. Regardless, Aiden.
How is Edwin Budding pulling a Chape teammate? What is what's
That's
that?
He started.
Look, I'm not bad. I'm not bad.
He started to learn Spanish.
Did you pay him for this? How did you pull that off?
Look, we can't get into it. I want to get into what the hell is happening right now. And Aiden, I want to hear your thoughts on it. Blur, of course, I want to hear your thoughts. I know that you both were on record about this, but yeah, it's just like this is a really weird situation and one that I think that a lot of people don't really know how to navigate. So before we get there, I mean, I'm sure that everyone who listens to the Melee Stats podcast knows what's going on, but couple days ago, just yesterday. Fuck, it feels so long ago. Smash World Tour released an announcement that said that they decided to cancel their not only their 2022 finals event, but all of their 2023 plans. And we will get into them canceling it, them being forced to cancel it, all that different type of stuff. But that's kind of the gist of it before we actually get into more granular stuff. But yeah, Aiden, you had some thoughts. I don't know if that's going to make it onto YouTube or whatever, but you had some really cogent thoughts that you just had about it. But do you want to like summarize some of your thoughts and we can get into it on a deeper level?
Yeah. Do you want like kind of Edwin's question of like where do we go from here?
Yeah,
Is that
that's
kind
a
of the
good
thought?
question because there's a lot of confusion in the scene, right?
Yeah, so I think the big things are like this is the first time that a LAN tournament or like the circuit in this case, but also individual tournaments like within it, including the championship and a few LAN tournaments, Glitch and Double Down next year, have been shut down, or like at least they received a message that strongly implied that they should shut down. So it put them in a really weird spot, like VGBC in the tour, and forced them to make that decision. And I think the big thing is like this has not happened since Evo 2013. There has not been a LAN event where this sort of action has been taken, where somebody has had to shut down without some sort of like IP mod, like Project M, for instance, right? Like we've seen a few messages in the past about like Project Plus being cut from some big tournaments because those tournaments needed a license, or not, maybe not even needed a license to operate necessarily, but just the fact that Project Plus was a part of those major Smash events, they had the threat of their broadcast being taken down, which for a major tournament that is selling like sponsorships on their broadcast is pretty damning for the tournament. So you pretty much have to cave. But Evo was like the last time like a LAN sort of like vanilla Melee tournament, so to speak, was shut down. So it's been 9 years, and that's why this is like such a big deal. A little over 9 years is that I don't think we really expected to be back in this position again. I also think that something super like the big underlying thing here that maybe like people like don't highlight enough, or that at least I want to highlight right now, is the switch up in messaging described from like the Smash
Yeah.
World Tour timeline.
Yeah.
Is the fact that people outside of Smash World Tour as well had individual relationships with Nintendo where they were seeking independent licenses and were also given soft permission to continue operating without one if that were the case, or if it were delayed or like not working out. And then all of a sudden the switch has just flipped and it's like, actually the thing we told you all year consistently doesn't apply anymore. And you need the license, you need to work with Panda, and you need to work it out with them, which is pretty damning because as you could tell from the beginning of the year, like a lot of people didn't want to work with Panda to begin with, and I would argue that's because a lot of TOs realized that there was some inconsistencies in Panda's messaging from Alan that made them not want to participate in it. I would also argue that the deal to participate in the circuit and like what was supposed to entice them into joining was also not very good, especially early on. So combined in that state where like a bunch of people were saying no, and we also have this competing circuit, it's like proven that TOs without this license, or at least outside of the Panda circuit, have plenty of opportunity to succeed and grow and operate their own things with soft permission from Nintendo to like continue. And all of a sudden that has all changed in like the span of a couple days. So it really puts the landscape of the scene in the future into question. People don't really know what direction we're going to go in. I think the reality is like bar tournaments, locals, college stuff, really regionals are never gonna flip the switch on getting shut down, in my opinion.
Mhm.
I don't think they even really enter the radar of like the Nintendo employees that would be willing to make that decision. They're just not big enough. The streams aren't big enough. They don't cause like enough of a hubbub. And I think like for that level of community event, I actually think nothing is probably going to change. But the big question right now is every major that isn't a part of the Panda circuit and every major that has operated without a Panda license, it brings into question whether or not they'll be able to operate at all. Right now, it seems Genesis is going to move forward. Like, and doesn't seem to be any problems, right? But also the messaging has been serious enough that VGBC has been willing to like cancel some pretty
Mhm.
major tournaments of their own.
Mhm.
Not to mention the tour championships are enormous at the tail end of a year where like the sunk cost of that circuit is already like done with, right? It's not like canceling like a year out before they started everything up, and like no, they're like locked into that venue and that event, and now it's being pulled from them, which is why it's so worrying, because it just means that it's like back on the table and it can happen to other people. And with people's I would say aversion to working with Alan, at least among the TO community, it puts us in a hard spot where it's like, well, do I have to work with this guy that I absolutely do not want to work with for reasons to most of these TOs that I think were internally apparent for most of this year? Like this is not that document that came out is not news to all of those people. It's something that I think is like understood by like a lot of people that are TOs. So it forces their hand. It's like, can I run tournaments at all? Do I have to eat the boot? Like, will me pushing back publicly now blacklist me from running anything, period, like on that
Mhm.
circuit or not? There's a lot of questions that remain unanswered right now.
That last part you said, I mean, I don't want to jump to any conclusions. Well, that's a big thing, right? Is that it's really easy to jump to conclusions at a time like this. One of the hardest things to do is say that you don't know what's happening, right? Like it's and the thing is that we know a lot of what's going on, especially people here, very knowledgeable in the scene, knew a lot of what was going on, but we don't know everything. And there's really important things, like especially when you talk about Panda, you talk about Alan's decision making to get here. We don't know what led to there, but yeah, the actions that have created this. Are like pretty damning, right?
Yeah.
And you talk about being blacklisted. If Smash World Tour wasn't killed by this, or wasn't killed by not having a license, it's probably killed by this. I can't imagine that they would be able to consider running stuff in the future, considering they did the whole Don Draper "Why I'm Against Tobacco." But yeah, no, it's hard to look at from that. And Blur, I want your opinion on this because we have this idea of whether or not it'll affect majors, and obviously it does. But like right? Genesis is running a major. Is that going to be affected? There's so many people who would be turned off by this idea completely, right? Why would you even decide to run a major if there's a 10% chance of Nintendo canceling it and you can't get anything back from it, right? Blair, what are the biggest things facing majors right now? The biggest concerns?
Oh man, so much. Basically, my entire like last 48 hours, been talking to TOs. I, no matter how much I try to kind of step away, and I've been trying to make myself an attendee and a commentator, and lessen these freaking roles, they claw me back in, right? And these sort of situations are just so crazy. It feels impossible not to be hyper engaged because we just all care about this game and this community so much. These are all of our best friends. Um,
It'd be easier if we didn't care.
oh, care so
For
much,
sure.
literally.
It,
Maybe more than my own life. I literally care about this shit. I'm not even kidding, right? And so the there's a lot of concerns. Everyone's worried about their future. So the main thing that we're trying to figure out is, do we need licenses going forward? What's a good plan with that? Do the big events get licensed? Do they do it privately? As in, do they do it behind the scenes? Do they publicly tell people that they're getting licensed?
Mhm.
How will the community deal with that? Do they just go unlicensed, right? And fuck it, we ball, right? And we just like let it run. And what are the consequences? And what are the chances of that? One of the big scary things about that is that Nintendo has shown a proclivity that once you're like kind of blacklisted, you're like done with for life. For being their partner long term. So a scary thing for someone like Gimmer is that he probably can't get a license for 2023 or 2024 or 2025 or pretty much lifetime, because usually once you're on their bad side, like you're just
They
never gonna.
remember it, bro.
They remember, like they legitimately don't forget on that. So if it is a license only world, we lose VGBC forever, and we don't really want to do that. Um, and,
It's
and
also
and
part of the reason
guarantee.
like why
Mhm.
I was like willing to do a stream like this evening is like I think I'm
Yeah,
finally at a place where I pretty much like rely on Nintendo in my career in zero capacity. I don't have to
yeah.
worry about the ramifications of speaking up anymore. Because I think there are times in the past where I absolutely would have like loved to like provided insight on like a similar, maybe not as like grand scale of an issue, but similar issues in the past. Because like a lot of the stuff like this has happened over the years, but my career was like too tied to the game and the community to like be able to like be comfortable speaking pretty freely like that. And like and that's why like I think a lot of people like won't speak out is like people have to like hedge the idea that Nintendo is going to be deeply involved in the future of the scene. And if
Mhm.
you vocally and publicly piss off like the bear, then you're probably in a situation where you're never going to be able to work with them again.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I think people would be surprised. Like, I worked at Twitch for 5 years, and I literally had a podcast where I talked about the inner workings of the scene, like to insane detail. I think I was pretty transparent the entire time, and I was like the number one contact they had. And I never got in trouble for it. I think maybe they're not plugged in. I don't know, but I also never really I don't know if I like stuff like this necessarily happened during that time, where I have to spit out some fuck Nintendo bars in the same way. So I see what you're saying, but I also think that transparency is so important that sometimes people um, they kind of let themselves be silenced on their own, and I don't think that's necessary in most cases, right? Um, Regardless of that, I think that we're all trying to figure it out, trying to figure out what the world of licensed, unlicensed, where we actually stand. And unfortunately, we're dealing with a party who literally doesn't respond to you for weeks, months at a time sometimes.
Yeah.
So we don't really have great answers, and we're trying to plan a next year, which just got devastated because we lost two tours at the same day, in the same day, at the same time. So it's like, how do we plan that while not knowing, structurally how our business relationships are going to work, and if we're going to get, if they're going to come after us, all that. Very difficult to make planning in that context. Then there's like, of course, Genesis coming up, right? Like Genesis, literally our biggest event of the year, would have to make that call, right? Like,
Mhm.
do they go licensed or not? And so far, they've not been on Nintendo's bad side. They're like one of our only events that haven't been. Riptide recently got a notice. Big House has already got a notice. You know, Evo's just done with Smash now. Like they're gone forever, right? Like that was
Yeah.
the thing we had back in the day.
Yeah, and Smash. I mean, after this particular instance, you have to wonder where SmashCon stands, right? There isn't like an
Oh yeah, no,
explicit
they're
statement
No.
about it yet, but that's like SmashCon and Genesis are our two biggest tournaments, and
yeah.
one of them is like now pretty likely to like not happen next year. I would say.
Yeah, so like it's SmashCon, Apex, Double Down, Pound, right? Plus SWT finals, I guess, right? And I guess the glitches and the smaller stuff. But like that's a
Mhm.
lot to just be
That's like
put
4
onto.
potential month defining, like, events.
Right, right. So it's like, who at this point is left who is even on who hasn't had a kerfuffle with Nintendo, right? Like that's big, big, which is
Yeah.
like Genesis and maybe Gommel, I guess, right? Battle of BC hasn't had like a major scuffle yet. They're still pretty new though, like so basically like that makes the licensed future really hard and untenable, where it's like, well, a lot of the guys we want to bring along in the coming years will never get a license, and we kind of already know that, right? So it's very hard for me to see how that license feature really does work. Maybe some events can get the license, but if they're going to shut down the ones that aren't licensed, then we're just going to have too big of a hole in our ecosystem to really work. There's the unlicensed future, which is we just kind of run it. But then the TOs, of course, are worried about losing their livelihoods. Events nowadays are like minimum 200K, usually like upwards of 400, 500K sometimes in terms of budget. So like you're going to lose a lot of money if it gets canceled. Now, there is a genius plan that Bobby Scar posited that I really liked. Doesn't really solve every issue, but it's funny, and I like it for that reason almost alone. Which is you don't refund everyone, you don't cancel the event. You still run the event, you just cancel the Smash Brothers. You don't have Smash on stream, you turn it into a protest, and we all kind of hang out. Like we have a backup plan, which is basically like we roll out the board games, we roll out the arcade games, we all get wasted, the ones who are above age and above legal drinking age, in a very good and professional and safe manner. Um, and we make it a party for a weekend, right? We don't turn our flights around, and we have fun. If we happen to play video games in some capacity, we do so, but you know, definitely not an official tournament. That's for sure. Um, and we make a broadcast that's kind of fun and lighthearted, and definitely a protest for sure. And we just do F Nintendo vibes for like 40 straight hours. Um, I actually don't think that's that terrible of an idea. It saves a lot of the cost that you would lose when getting a tournament canceled. Like the venue fees for a lot of these events still account for like 250K of your total. You would lose sponsorship revenue, which can
Mhm.
be, like it's still not that much money. Like you would definitely, the sponsors would be mad, and that's not good, right? But most events don't make more than 30, 50K in sponsorships. The best case, literally the best events that anyone's ever done is 200K that I know of, like for a single off one event, and how well they do. It's usually not above 100 realistically. So like we're talking, of course, bad money to lose. But I don't
Yeah.
think you lose all of it. And theoretically, if we scale ourselves properly, you could do that. So that seems to be like an idea that everyone's like, maybe that's decent. I don't know. In the end, it's kind of a fun one for us to talk about. But I also know that people actually running these events, and other than Lud, I don't know anyone who's really that willing to go unlicensed right now. Shouts to Lud. Like everyone else I talk to is like, yeah, I don't know, man. Seems like that's my ass. And they might
Mhm.
be not so into it. So again, fun thought. I don't know if we can actually get people to do it.
Yeah, the
Blur, I just
feasibility of it's a thing, and then you have to think about the ramifications that could have in the future. Like, is a whatever Jack Link's beef jerky willing to sponsor your next year's event when they're like, last year you just got drunk on stream and rapped like that. That's all you did. So there's definitely some questions about the future, but I do I love that Bobby Scar had some positive ideas because it's very easy right now to be a big doomer. But we've been such a resilient scene that like it's crazy to act like this is the one that knocks us off completely. So I do love the resilient, hopeful ideas. Edwin Budding, what do you think?
Yeah, so I think it's just kind of worth sort of like explaining this a little more overtly because I get a sense that all of us kind of understand what goes into this when we talk about things like licensing, when we about things like streaming events. So I think it might be a blur just for anyone who's listening and is not able to like kind of follow how we're talking about these things and taking a lot of things like with an assumption. I think it might be worth explaining just like why things like outside of implicitly why turn like the fact that tournaments have streams, like why it's important for events as a revenue source. So if you could just like explain that and
Why
kind
are
of how,
streams an important revenue source?
yeah, just to anyone who's not
So
like
the
that
main thing
familiar.
is like the stream is the number one deliverable that sponsors care about, right? Like ultimately the eyeballs are what they're paying for. So having a stream is really important. A stream can be shut down through a DMCA, which is what Nintendo would invoke in order to shut it down. But make no mistake, they can shut down the whole event as well with a C&D. Um, Now, if you turn your event into not a Smash Brothers event, you can still run your event, but that's a different story, right? Um, and so the streams are really important because there's broadcast rights sales, which means whatever money BTS, VGBC, or whoever pay you to run the stream on their channel. And there's also the sponsorship revenue and ad revenue that you might be able to get on the side. So that revenue is legitimate. It's not the majority of our revenue. The majority of our revenue is, it probably always be venue fees. So it's the ticket sales at the door. Um, but it's still a large part. And for some events, it's like all of it. So like the summits of the world can't get DMCA'd, right? Because like the stream is like everything, right? They get obviously the crowdfunding from the voting process, but ultimately their sponsors and their Twitch revenue is like why they're running the thing in the first place, right? So it's not like just losing our streams is very tenable at all. And realistic on a community growth perspective, like we just don't stream events and we go back to cave days, right? Like we go back to like '09, and I don't want to do that personally. Maybe it's a last resort, but if we can, I'd like to avoid it.
Do you guys want to talk about Panda for a bit? Because I think that Panda is this very big key to what's happening here. Very big piece of the puzzle, and one that we've kind of mentioned obtusely, but maybe it's best to just get into it. So yeah, I mean, hey, I have an NDA with Panda, so my good friends will probably talk more than I will. But what I can say is that Panda was talked about in this Smash Roll Tour Medium post. Pretty obliquely, like pretty just like straight out pointing fingers to specifically the CEO, allegedly, I guess I can throw in there. But yeah, there's I mean these talks were corroborated by other TOs from different organizations. It's pretty much something that we're kind of assuming is true, whether or not it's for malicious purposes or just kind of um someone who believed that they could do the best for the scene and happened to awake the sleeping beast. You know, hard to put Pandora back in the box. Really easy to open that box, but really hard to put it back in. Um, but yeah, I mean, like Panda is an institution that's been around for years. We saw them sponsor Zayn. They still are the sponsors of Plup and AMSA. They literally it's what our rankings are called. Which, by the way, the melee stats and MILM, who knows what'll happen there? Eyes emoji. Um,
What do you mean? Who knows what will happen there? You guys have to do it. You know that, right?
eyes emoji.
No, no,
Like,
no, no, no. Don't you eyes emoji this. Literally, it has to be done. Just get it done.
we'll do it.
I'm not asking
We
nicely.
We'll
But anyway, let's move on.
we'll figure something out, Blair. So
no
No,
no no
no,
no.
forget. They're
Edwin
gonna do it.
Edwin.
You
It
have to
won't be.
do it.
I've
I'm
got
not.
this
I'll do
under control.
Edwin. I'll
Look,
do
we
you
have
one
another.
better.
We have
As the
big
leader
fish
of
to
melee
fry.
stats.
You guys can handle the rankings for God's sake.
I'll do you one better. We're not even gonna figure out. We're just gonna do it. We're
Just
gonna have a
do it,
top
God.
100 this
Just,
year.
just do it.
Who knows what the MPGR might still exist? Who knows? Maybe my number one will be Two Saint. My number two will be Aklo. My number three will be Amsa. Coming in at 4 is Axe again.
You gotta do it.
Uh, who knows what the MPGR will be, but there will be a top 100 done by people who have done ballots for top 100, who have worked on the top 100. I promise you that. I promise you that these things continue and that there's been so much in the works these past couple days to continue what has been happening. But yeah, to get back to Panda, they are this organization that's been pretty big, pretty well invested in the Smash scene, and Blur, you talk about it like it's a foregone conclusion. You said that we already have another finale or whole circuit next year that's done. We talk about Panda as if they're completely dead. You know, what's the what do we think the future for that is? Edwin, do you have any beef you're willing to air out? Some any tea you're willing to spill? Now's the time. If you have any Panda tea.
Okay, so I will go on the record and say that I have a lot of friends that worked for Panda. I'm not just
Yes,
talking
Panda
about
is a
we.
large organization.
Yeah.
And for all that we know, very, very, very few people knew what was going on, possibly
Yeah.
just Alan. Um,
Yeah.
and
So
so,
I'm,
so
I'm
to
just
not
gonna say that.
incriminate people who work for Panda or PG Stats.
Yeah, I have no problem with, practical tasks. I don't have any problem with Walt. I don't have a problem with Tish. A lot of the kind of day-to-day people there that are putting out content and more sort of like on the community facing side of things, like to for the, in the media sphere and everything. I do not, based on what I know and just like my personal relationships with them, they are good people. And like I don't, and I think it's unfortunate that they're affiliated with Panda at this moment, but I do think that they were contributing to something that they thought had, the community and their own values in mind, and that
Hmm.
obviously turned out not to be the case. I will say, like, they seem like good people. They seem as shocked as anyone else. However, I do have to be honest, and I want to be transparent as someone that has worked with Panda Global, not just for the summer PGR, but even obviously for the Melee Stats top 100 all time ranking. I will say that working with the day to day employees there was I had a professional and good experience. But I will say that when I read some of the stories about what it was like for other entities in the scene, like Beyond the Summit and Golden Guardians, to interact with Alan, the Panda CEO, I will be honest. I A lot of their problems with working with him, as far as just like how they were portrayed in the document. I will say that it resonated with my experience having pitched him this project on the all-time top 100, and this is not something that I like particularly want to be super like, loud about. I'm not gonna like make a big threat about it, but we have listeners to the show, and I think that it's important to kind of contextualize this kind of thing, because it comes up when you have a group in the scene and you have someone leading that group that's claiming to represent the scene in its best interest at hand. So, just to kind of give context to what it was like with working with Alan. One of the first roadblocks that we had when it came to pitching the project and trying to get the partnership to work well was the fact that Alan was this was someone who was very adamant initially on the inclusion of band players in the scene, right? A band player in the scene's history. He was very he just did not agree with our decision to exclude band players from the top 100 all times list. And it was especially surprising to me coming at the time of just like it was a year after all the Smash had its Me Too moment and
Hmm.
everything. And just kind of like briefly um, summarize that. And that was a real problem that I had in one of the pitch meetings with Panda Global. That was kind of a difficult bridge to cross. Now, I will say that if I'm going to point this out there, I do want to give credit to people who are there in the room that were, that understood where, Melee Stats is coming from and were willing to vouch for us to Alan. I want to give credit to PTAS. I want to give credit to Tish. And I want to give credit to all my friends at Panda who, I was telling about the project at the time and telling them that I really want this to work, who, vouched for us. So this is not me coming out vindictively because something didn't work out well. It's not me like looking for clout or like looking for sympathy. I'm really just kind of sharing what it was like to work with this other figure representing this organization at the highest level and the struggles that came with
Just
it.
curious. In the end, they weren't included, right?
No, they were not.
I
Okay,
don't
sweet.
think we would have done the project if we were
No.
forced to
Yeah.
include them.
No, I made it very clear that we would walk
Yeah,
away
you
if
guys know
that was the
something
case.
wild I learned recently? He was the head CO of MG Sandstorm for Ultimate. You guys know that?
Uh,
For Smash 4.
Yeah.
I just found out. Yeah.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
that
You ran like a Smash 4 doubles tournament there, right?
they okay. Did you? This is.
Do you guys
Do you
remember the
guys
team that
remember the
won
comp?
by any
Yeah, the
chance?
controversy about that. That there was M2K and Zero. The TOs gave them a team name that they didn't ask for, and they named the team "Don't Hate Us Because We're Autistic."
Yeah. I will okay, so
I,
Like
as a
MK Zero
very
did not name
dark,
themselves that.
darkly
He actually
funny.
named them that.
it is. There was an apology which basically said,
He
"Oh,
apologized.
I didn't think that was public."
This is one of those things that were like,
Wait, that was just for me and the other TOs. That wasn't a public
That
thing.
was
Yeah,
just that was just
I
for me and the boys.
yeah, I do want to say that that was
Can't the boys have a joke? Can't the boys joke anymore?
yeah, that
I'm
was
just
8
I'm
years
just
ago, so
saying,
I'm
like,
trying I like I don't want to like it is it is like bad. I don't want to I don't want like it is very very awful. I'm just like like I don't know how that like kind of fits with but I am I'm glad that we brought it up that it was a thing that happened.
look,
It's like
I
definitely
he
think
he
it's
he apologized, and look, we're bringing up the
yes.
petty, the small. This is from
yeah,
eight
like
years
that's
ago.
not
A lot of this stuff is small. Like, I don't want to like. Ultimately, it's not like I don't really care if he's a good
Yeah.
person or not. That's
It's
not
it's
really
kind of
relevant.
to
Well,
And
contextualize that this is not a extremely surprising thing for people who have worked with him, that there is a level of control that he might want to dictate that is not like necessarily aligned with the community's position. Yeah, the MVG Sam sort of stuff. I don't know. I'm not going to really
yeah,
particularly touch
I
that. That just
I
seems
just
dumb.
I
But
just
like,
don't like character assassination. It's not really what I think this is important at this point.
wait, didn't you bring up the MVG Sandstorm?
Of course I did. It's a funny. I brought up because that's funny. That's
Okay.
funny,
yeah. I
right?
mean, I'm
I
here
think
bringing up
what
like
Edwin is saying
it
is contextualizing what
in a
it's like to
professional
work with him
setting.
and how this is
Yeah,
not like a
like
shocking
ultimately,
thing.
he's has some unprofessional
It did feel like a
tendencies,
cheap
and
shot.
yeah. Anyway, I think more what I think about this is
saying,
like Nintendo as an or not Nintendo, fucking Panda as an org. Um, I think you can't like you have to be a real psychopath to like make a community focused organization that you operate for years before you like activate your nefarious plot to take over the
yeah,
Smash scene. Like,
It is
I
like a
don't
Pixar
I don't
villain
think
type
it's
thing.
like that. I the way I described it on my stream is like based off of because I remember when a lot of people were talking to Alan, like a lot of TOs were talking to Alan around like I want to say like November, December of like the end of last year. And the takeaway from a lot of people's conversations was like they aren't ready for this. Like they aren't equipped to like do what is being asked. And it seems like there's like a lack of like resources and like plans for like what is ahead of them. And with that uh like with that in mind, I think Alan was probably this is like a project that was like being spoken about for years. Like apparently
Mhm.
there's like this is ongoing since like
mm,
2018, 2019. Uh this wasn't something that like popped up in the span of like a few months, right? And my impression is that Nintendo probably finally came to Alan at the end of 2021 and was like, "Hey, we're ready. Run this shit in 2022," which is a monumental task to turn that around in like just a few months to have like a fully built out circuit operating in like the following year, which was only basically like a month or two away at the time. And
Yeah.
I think Allen was in a situation where he was probably like handed the fucking golden key to like do it all and was like, I need to make this happen by basically any means necessary, and took the route of like kind of lying and stretching truths and like telling people things that weren't necessarily true, vouching for Nintendo in spots where they didn't even know that he was saying those things, and like
Mhm.
where Nintendo actually had completely different perspectives. Like he was doing all these things to try and convince people to join his circuit so he could get all together and execute it, which in my mind is like it's understandable. Like if you have this goal and like this idea that the scene needs to be moved forward through a licensed circuit that you've been the opportunity to finally do, Like I see why he like probably took this path in order to get there, but the idea, like I think the thing that gets thrown around a lot is like everybody is like, how did he not think this was like gonna get out? Like, how did he? Does he think like these TOs don't talk to each other? Does he think like nobody communicates and like passes on
He-
information and like makes sure things like all line up and like feel good? I That's like the surprising part to me because I can't think of a single thing in Smash that has any sort of longevity that like started with anything but transparency.
Mhm.
And
I mean, he's just never organized in Smash at a high level until now, right? And so
I
yeah,
mean,
it's
that's
tough.
the incredible thing. Like, as far as like, if you ask most people in 2019 or like 2018 what they knew about Panda, what would have been, right? Like, they sponsor players. They
Yeah,
have the rankings. They're like a media organization that sponsors like FGC people, right? It's like within the span of what, 2 or 3 years, it's like these guys want to run an officially like licensed circuit. It's like what's their background here? Like,
sure.
is like what? How? Like, they're not
yeah.
going to start with like a
I mean,
smaller
it
event
was
or
clear.
something.
It was clear from the initial conversations. Like they didn't have a TO hired yet. They didn't have the events planned out. It's like they had never run anything major of this scale before. Like ignore all the stuff in the statement. People were skeptical from the get go, if
Oh
not a
yeah.
little hopeful. But people were certainly skeptical that I know that like spoke to Alan, including myself, who is like, I wanted to get mildly excited that it seemed like there was this door into like Nintendo's room and we have this like circuit. But at the same time, I was like, it's a little weird that like none of this is planned yet. Do you remember the giant period of time at the beginning of this year where everybody on like Reddit and Twitter, it hit like March, April, and everybody was like,
We thought it
so
was
it's like
canceled.
Panda still happening?
I
Yeah,
Like
think it
people
took
didn't.
until like late May
Yeah,
to like
The
actually
first
get more
event was in
details.
June.
from the public perspective, like people
Yes.
didn't even know if it was still going to happen anymore. And that was
yeah.
because when they announced it, I think they announced because Nintendo was like, "Yep, we're good. Let's roll. Let's do
Mhm.
this." And Panda can't say no in that spot, right? Because they've waited years for this to happen. So it's like Alan has to say yes, announce it, get it out there, and now he has the monumental task of piecing it all together. And his back is probably against the wall, and like not to like defend him too much, right? Because I don't agree with like what he did to get there, and I think there was certainly a more transparent approach that he could have taken that would have been more successful at the end of the day. And also I kind of believe the fact that maybe he didn't know, he
Yeah.
didn't like that they were going to get explicitly shut down on this like Wednesday before Thanksgiving, right? But all that doesn't absolve all the actions and context and communication that has led to Smash World Tour making this decision to shut down. And
I
if
I think
he had been like, if he had been forthright with everybody along the whole way, instead of one-on-one calls that are NDA'd, maybe group calls with TOs where it's like input, like, how do we work this out? What do I need to do for you guys? How do we like compromise with Nintendo, get this all figured out? That would have been a much better approach, like in hindsight, than like whatever has happened, over the course of this year.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and you bring up a good point. It's like, okay, we're not defending him, but in general, first of all, the character assassination stuff is petty, but he's also been in the scene for a long time, and we saw he grew Panda from what it is, and it was a
That's what
very
I'm saying.
good
You
part
don't
of our
fake
scene.
you don't fake loving fighting games and running
No,
a fighting game primary organization for
uh,
15 years.
and
That's
He was a
not what I'm
brawl
saying.
player.
That's not
every
what I'm saying.
You
he's a
don't start as a brawl player if you don't
Samurai Panda's
actually
been in the
like the
scene for a
game.
long time, and the truth of the matter is, I've said it before. I truly believe he did what he thought was best for the community. He was very misguided and very naive
Yeah.
in that process, and he didn't
Mhm.
listen to other people when building it. Right, like a lot of people, gave him advice,
I
and
think
he simply didn't listen.
if anything, what I could say I'm miffed by is like across all these conversations that he had with people, um, I think there comes across this like weird air of arrogance that he could do it better than everybody. He somehow had the knowledge and the position and the tools to do a better job than anyone, which is just weird because I feel like
How can you blame him for that when I
Respect.
feel like I have that same arrogance? You
Yeah,
know,
well,
like
that's hold on. We're not. This isn't. If you want to get into the Blur shakedown, I will do
whoa,
that. But this is a
whoa.
whole.
That's that's gonna be
Aiden,
a whole.
whoa,
That's gonna be a long
we're
episode.
buddies
Yeah,
here,
that's
bro.
a
We're on
whole
a
different episode. We could do the Blur episode next week because we will
Calm,
get sidetracked.
calm yourself, Aiden. We're good. You and me.
It's I've anyway. Anyway, the point I'm trying to make is like it was really weird to from my perspective. Like I don't know Alan's like everyday life. I don't know all of his like professional background, right? But to me, it's like he hasn't worked in esports. Like really, he hasn't worked in traditional esports. He also wasn't a TO of like a major tournament, but he's like posturing to like be the guy who like understands all of these pieces better than anyone to be able to put it all together. Whereas like I think when you're in that situation, a really strong character trait is being humble enough to let the people who actually do the work and like live through the experiences of like making the majors or working in like mainstream esports to tell you what would be best, and then your job as a leader is to listen to those people, take their feedback into account, and then take actions based on what they tell you. Like that is like what a strong like leader does in my mind. And I think like that like even a part of my own personal growth, I think of like a really big weakness that I had as a younger TO is like I did have a huge ego. And I think a big part of the over the last few years is like letting go of the idea that I am like super good at everything I do and like I know everything. Like really understanding that like I actually don't know that much and I need to ask questions and like let people tell me how it is and then do what they say. And I'm the piece at the middle that has all these inputs who's able to make like the decision with all those factors around me. But I feel like he isolated all those people and kind of like talked down to them and then made the decision on his own. And now it's kind
Mhm.
of biting him.
I just, like it's so obviously I don't know everything that happened behind the scene as far as his relationships with other event organizers go. But a small part of me, and maybe this is wrong, maybe I'm overestimating the difficulty of this. A small part of me thinks it would have been so easy to buy everyone's loyalty. It really feels like with the resources he had available to him, like the Nintendo backing, communicating the kind of the end product, his vision for the scene. I
That's
feel
what
like it could have been so
Here's
easy.
okay. So
but
there's yes and no. So like first of all, I obviously think that like Smash is pretty cheap to overall
Hmm.
come in and be the number one on and get market share and stuff. But like I do think the job that he had, which was to quickly stand up a league, get all the TOs on board while making the TOs like him,
Mm.
while and making Nintendo happy is a very difficult job.
this
He
is
had
where
a
it's
very
Nintendo's fault in my mind, where they were like, let's back a
Sure.
circuit without actually any resources. And I think they left a lot of the spending and money part of it to convince people to Panda, who doesn't necessarily have like that much money to throw around on their own. But Nintendo definitely does, but has a like a fucked up structure internally to be able to approve anything like that. And if they wanted to take this seriously, they would have walked in with the cash up front necessary to convince these people right away. Because the problem was they came in with deals for TOs too late. Where like
yeah.
give up all your sponsorship rights, give up all your sponsors, even though your event may be a month or two away, and like let us handle all that. But they didn't have any sponsors yet. They were giving money for broadcast, they were paying for production, were paying for casters, but they were like picking those staff members and stuff. Um, and then but so it's like give up a major revenue stream so we can cover a thing that you've already allotted budget for. So you're ultimately like losing out, right? And you can't be a part of the Smash World Tour, and you have to be on our stream. So it's like a weird, it's just a losing deal at that stage in the timeline. Whereas, like, by this point in the Panda circuit, right, they might have gotten a lot of money. I don't know what the dollar value is on these deals that they brought in, like the Panda Express one, and then they brought in another deal. But say those are
Milk.
six-figure deals, right? Milk is a like cutie. My former roommate had a sponsor with them. I know they pay a lot. Like they might have gotten a lot of money from that. But the problem is that's coming at the tail end of the year where that money can't be used to like influence or convince people anymore. I actually think if Alan came to the table at the
Yeah.
beginning of the year, I
Mhm.
I I think there's actually no shot people would have said no if he came up. He's like, yeah, we need your broadcast, but you also get 50 to 100K flat for your major event. It's like, dude, most people aren't saying no
Oh,
anymore because
50
the
to
money,
100, they wouldn't
dude.
say no.
Yeah, the
They wouldn't say
fucking
no to
because
50
the
to 100.
fucking money talks. Like but they
Yeah.
had no money. It was get into this deal that is losing for you because we are licensed. That was like
Mhm.
the offer. And I
I mean,
don't
Yeah, there's no value
and
add,
more
right?
context, like they were an order of magnitude off. Like some TOs got like 5K deals. So like it's not really like even
well,
in the ballpark of
I
where you
think
would
I
need to
think that
be
for
to
the
really
people who
have
took
people
the
on the
sums,
tours.
like I'm not gonna put down the offer to pay for production stuff. Like if they
Yeah.
all in pay for production and casters, that's a huge chunk of change, and I'm gonna
That's a
acknowledge that.
lot. That's a lot.
But
Yeah.
I think for anybody who had already sold sponsors on their event and had already has their event like planned to be executed within the scope of like, 1 to 6 months, it's like that
Yeah.
doesn't make any sense because you've already like budgeted and planned everything out. It
Sure. And obviously their
Nintendo
big event support
Nintendo
was
Nintendo could
more.
have bought everybody out, Edwin, is what I'm trying to say. Is like
Yeah.
that's what makes me so
Yeah,
mad
that's a
is that this if this company had taken this opportunity seriously and thought about it for just a few minutes and been like, yeah, I think if we give them money, they'll do it. But they didn't really do that. It was like this roundabout way of offering it through Panda that put people in a position where they said no. One, because I think a lot of TOs didn't trust Alan because of like the miscommunications or like
Mhm.
maybe the outright lies. And also because the deal that was initially on the table for them was like pretty bad.
But
well,
Aiden,
this is what I was
the
trying
thing,
to
no,
get at,
Edwin,
right?
let me I want to go through the budgetary
Yeah,
part
you
because this
gotta
is
let the
really
blur
important.
speak.
No,
No, it's
this is
okay. I'm
important
listening.
what he's talking about because we're talking about the finals was in the Novo Theater, LA Convention Center, free entry, right?
Mhm.
And so he clearly put his money near the end for that part, right?
Sure.
And I actually do know the sales numbers. I don't think I should say them out because maybe it would narc someone who the people who told me. No, and I'm not just trying to do that. But he did sell a lot. He sold a whole hell of a lot, right? And one of the big criticisms I had about the structure of what he was building, it's also actually coincidentally a structural problem with SWT, but that's not here there, is that it wasn't done in a rev share way, right?
Yeah.
So you sell against people's brands, which is their tournaments, like let's say a big house, which is literally the most important event, pretty much the only event on this freaking thing, right? I think they also had like CEO and do they have Gommel? I don't remember.
Almost on
Um,
there. Yeah.
yeah, so those are decent too, but whatever. Mostly it was Big House, and Gommel on the side, and you're selling against that stuff, and they get mostly a flat fee with plus some production support, right? Um, and that's okay. But when you don't have the rev split, that means the TOs don't have visibility in how much you're actually selling. So for all they know, you're making out with buku bucks. You're coming out with millions, and against their own brands, and they're not getting a slice of that pie, which makes it really hard. All you have to do to structure it properly, be like, look, guys, we're for a Nintendo circuit. We're not going to be able to do sales well year one, but if we do, you're going to get the rev share at the end of the year, right? Where once we get done with sales, instead of coming up with an upfront fee. But because he wanted to do an upfront fee, which would save him money because then he'd get the margin on whatever the difference in sales is, right? He ends up making it so that the TOs get a really bad deal. You simply just do a rev share deal, make it better for the TOs, and you actually secure the TOs that you really need long term. And then once your sales get bigger, you can change your agreements with TOs and make it more favorable for the league, right? So like that's obvious. I don't want to minimize though just how hard it is to get all the TOs on the same page, and that part was genuinely difficult for him. So I understand why he was scrambling and trying
Mhm.
clearly desperation tactics to get people on
I
there. He's about to lose a lot of money, but in terms of this Panda final, about to lose an insane amount of money. And I think it's a shame that the TOs whose brands were basically sold against to make that happen are going to have all the money that their brands basically raised go to an empty LA Convention Center weekend, right? That's just
64,000
whack,
square feet.
right?
Yeah.
Big
Yeah.
paying for that basically. Gommel's paying for that. Like that's
I
really
th-
what's happening here.
I think if the money, like, on obviously this is more challenging than just like saying it, but if the money is there, it's like not as difficult to convince people to be on the same page as I think you make it out to be. I think, in my opinion, from the way you talk about it, I think you really call back upon the Blurkit days
Yep.
where you had nothing to offer anybody, if I'm being honest, and it was like it was all a bet. And I acknowledge that that also has to do with like time frame and like constraints and things like that. But it's
It
like
was also
hard
the
to get
first of
people
its kind. We didn't know what we were doing.
it's hard to get people to cooperate when there's really nothing on the table. But what angers me about this and like what is so shitty about shutting like Smash World Tour down and like also like trying to jeopardize or like interfere with stuff like the Papa John's deal or potentially stopping future deals like that is finally the money is there. Like there
Yeah.
are pathways for the money to exist, and instead of like out competing these people and like offering better deals, Nintendo is like, actually, you either need to like move through our very inefficient, long-winded process that doesn't actually work most of the time, or sign on to this other circuit, or potentially get shut down. Like there's just this like hilarious like viewpoint that Nintendo seems to have by their collective decision making, where like we finally kind of made it on our own in a way where we have like the resources as an independent community to like create the dream circuit potentially. And they don't want to be a part of that. They're backing a horse that is like less efficient and doing a worse job. And I would say that fact is internally acknowledged by Nintendo employees, by the way. And the fact that that is the case, that's what makes me think that this final decision to shut these boys down came from higher up, because I
Mhm.
know that there's people at Nintendo who think Alan was doing a fucking bad job. And I and I and that's what miffs me so hard. It's like our community competitors were doing a better job, and instead of sticking with it and competing and trying to figure out a way to navigate it next year, it's like fuck you, we're taking you out back
Well,
and we're putting you on your
well,
knees.
I mean, just
Like
just by pure numbers, like if you just looked at every Panda Cup qualifying event, other than Big House and Gamo,
Other
which
than Big
were
House, other than
which
Kamal.
which were not big because of Panda Cup. They've been big for a decade.
Mhm.
Like the boost that like Panda Cup gave to like a CEO or what was that local
Lost
in
Tech City.
I
SoCal
mean, even
that,
Lost Tech
oh,
that I
save
City
Mr.
commentated?
Lombardi.
that was a
Same as the
three-day
like
for 139 entrants or whatever.
yeah, like
Oh,
it didn't actually move the needle on any of those events, and they certainly didn't become majors or super majors. So it's like
And
how
Blur, the
Hey,
successful.
LCQ.
hey,
Blur,
hey,
tell me
to
about
be
the
fair,
LCQ.
to be
How many
fair,
people signed up?
first two saving Mr. Lombardis, go look at who attended those. I'm just saying those weren't SoCal locals.
Okay, sure. And I'm not, I mean, shout out to those TOs. I'm not saying anything bad on them. It's just more like I'm saying the Panda Cup bump was not crazy. In fact, it was non existent. And like people didn't care about the thing he built. And the sales, like we're talking about, even though he had a professional Nintendo backing, which genuinely does make sales easier, that part is not incorrect. Uh, Papa John's is a bigger deal than all of his sponsors combined, right?
and didn't
So
and didn't have Nintendo behind it.
and
And
even without Nintendo, and then prizing. If we're talking about prizing, if we're looking at another metric, Smash World Tour had a bigger prize pool,
Yeah,
right? So, like in
by
almost
far.
every category, this thing was getting its ass beat in the streets, right? And so it's like Nintendo picked this horse, and that makes it even harder. Where we're like, hey, if this is really the thing that you want, why is it like the worst one? Right? Like,
yeah,
and that part's bummer. And the real truth is because it's the only one that really wants to work with them, right? And that's
Mhm.
hard for us to reconcile with because we're like, but it's such a bad deal for us, right?
yeah.
It's such a bad deal for us as a community. It's simply the worst product of the three.
I think
Yeah.
Ken is kind of like spitballed the best version of the circuit in the past,
And
and it's
Chen,
like
Hopid.
Ken Chan Hoppit has the right idea. Whereas like the biggest totem pole like TOs basically have a co-op. There's a third party like commissioner who's the head of all of it, who doesn't have stake in any of these organizations, that the co-op agrees is like the leader to make these decisions. And
Not
then
Blur, right?
you leverage probably not Blur,
They
but
vote
you
for me. Hey,
but
you're
you
voting. They don't vote for me. Continue.
but you leverage and then you leverage the sales arm of Beyond the Summit, which is like demonstrably successful and already built out and already doing Smash sales, and you use that as the arm for the circuit. And then finally, instead of making a brand new tournament out of nowhere to try and make the finals, you make Genesis the finals of the circuit, because it happens at a great time in the year where after it's over, there's a pretty natural off season, and it
Mhm.
is obviously our most important and historic community event. It's just you give it to Genesis. And I think arguing about that is a fucking waste of time. And I think that is like the perfect community circuit using all of the resources that we already have with the systems in place that we already have to bring money into the scene. And that would be an amazing circuit, one that VGBC even like and Justin and like the Smash World Tours team could like even cooperate and like involve themselves in. I think that is like such a possible thing to like put together. And the fear now is that any sort of like independent effort is going to be
Yeah.
snuffed out instead of this whatever this panda circuit is, which is like
Yeah.
clearly shutting down things aside, clearly hasn't been very good.
Right. I
Possible in
mean,
terms of logistics, probably not possible in terms of like realistic outcome, right?
I've talked about that circuit model with I think it was LD and Ken before, and I think it's decent. The thing is, like you're mentioning, it's like the idea of starting a circuit now is just so insane. Right? Like at this point, we just got a circuit shut down, and another one died. It's like I would it's rough because we just went from having circuits to not in like literally a
Yeah.
day, and we just want that hole to be filled again. And certainly I think that we all want to go towards a world of cooperation where we at least have a unified voice for these freaking licensing conversations with Nintendo and so on. And we all know how much better sponsorship sales would be if there was a unified front.
Mhm.
But it's going to be tough going forward because it seems like Nintendo's mantra is the bigger you are, the harder you fall, and we're the ones making you fall, right? And so, like, is Nintendo just going to be like shutting down any circuit that pops up? Is a thing anyone would have to think about.
Well, I
I
think the
guess
other
no, go on, Edwin. Go on. You're good.
Well, one of the things I was going to bring up is that I think sort of we started the conversation talking about Panda, and we talked about the unusual spot that they were in and the ways that created problems for the rest of the scene, right? So now we're back here. We talked about that. We talked a little bit about the circuits. I mean this I mean, just to kind of wrap it together. I mean, this is a company that's still, unless something comes out during the stream that we're not reading right now. I mean, like, this is a company that's still in the scene right now. They
Mhm.
still presumably have MPGR. Alan, as of right now, is still the head of Panda. Um, where do we move forward with this? How is there a way that we address this? Do the TOs do the free association of TOs or co-op or whatever release a statement saying that Alan is banned from events or that they're not going to have like
We're not gonna do any of that.
Panda?
That part's already solved. Look, you guys are gonna do the new rankings. No one's gonna go to the Panda Cup. Like this, that part, I'm so much less worried about than like
What does
the actual
2023
move
look
forward
like?
strategy. That's
Yeah.
the hard
Mhm.
part. The hard part is that we have one major in the first 6 months of 2023. That's the hard part, right? We have just Genesis Speed now
Collision?
that we
There's
just lost.
Collision.
Look, maybe you can call Collision a major and we can make that happen.
I
We
think
could
it's
probably
got
make
4 of the top 8
It's got Zayn
we
and
confirmed
can
right now.
IBW. It's a
look.
major.
Okay, sure, we can make that poppin'. Right? I'm just talking about historic ones in the
I
past.
understand.
We just lost a lot, and I think Collision could totally be a replacement. And I think we should, and I do want to make it clear. I think we should because we have to. But like, yeah, like the calendar is the number one problem, and also again, like when you talk to TOs, it's like there are TOs that you guys right now don't realize are considering not running stuff next year
Yeah.
because of this news, who are now considering no longer running their 2023 event because they're
Mm,
like, "Hey, man,
yeah.
I'm not gonna." There's the one side. There's the people who are like, look, bro, if this is a licensor only future, I'm just not gonna run tournaments. Which is
I
where
don't
me and people like me and Aiden are in, right? Like I'm not gonna run a tournament with Nintendo and Panda telling me what to do, and neither is Aiden. Like for the rest of our lives, I'm just not gonna do that. I have better things to do with my life. And so like there's TOs who are in that camp who are just like, well, if that's the case, I'm just not gonna do anything anymore. And then there's other TOs who are like, well, if you're telling me in order to not do that, I have to be unlicensed and take this massive financial hit potentially. Maybe I'm just going to wait a year and see how this whole thing shakes out, right? And then we have nothing for 2023. So it's like there are a lot of TOs, again, a lot of TOs that you guys are probably just assuming are on are happening for next year, even a month, even after losing, a huge chunk of our calendar, who are currently reconsidering, which
I
is the
mean,
most important story
I
about
actually
all this.
think not that they have like no cost to worry about, but I
Yeah.
think probably the best positioned event to take the risk right now is Summit because so
Mm.
many of the costs are like are internally bared. Like
Mhm.
they don't have to worry about like they're the perfect like high visibility event, but like relatively low cost. Um, and I think if they should try to run at least like one or two more to see what happens. I understand like that's maybe still a big ask because it is like salaried employee time and stuff like that. But I think in comparison to the average TO, where a lot of the financial stake rests on like an individual person and they have to rent out a large venue that if it gets canceled like a week out, they won't get any money back. BTS doesn't have to worry about that part of the equation
Mhm.
because they own or like they lease the studio that they're in.
Mhm.
And I think it would be really nice to see them try to rip at least one more event just to see how it plays out.
That'd be interesting. How about this? How about, we're talking about 2023, and I understand that this is, we talked about the issue, right? Do you run unlicensed and then deal with that? Do you run licensed and deal with that? Um, we're talking about the circuit as if it's dead, right? Is that the case? Is 2023? We're going to have a Panda Cup finale. It's going to be in a 64,000 square foot arena, and the finals are going to be in a one of the
It's dead.
nicer.
It's dead.
how are you so confident about this? Like the players, commentators, they signed like contract. You think every single player that got invited is not going?
Yeah. I mean, everyone I've talked to, I think they're not
So
going.
I guess
We'll
the question
see.
I have is, I don't care if people are. Will 2023, will Panda Cup circuit, do we have any thoughts that this might exist in 2023, regardless of whether or not people go? Will this thing exist, even if it's just in name only?
If the finals is an unmitigated disaster, he'd have to really want to lose money.
Hmm.
Like he'd have to like be insanely crazy to do that, right? Like that would just be like, hey, I just want to lose $1 million sort of
Yeah.
kind of business decision, which I don't understand. Um I like maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the next few days some incredible revelations will come around and he'll turn
So I was
this
thinking,
PR boat around. But like, bro, my
dude,
imagination is not that strong.
dude,
And
that's what I'm saying. I'm
I
trying to like imagine what the statement could even be. Do you know what I
what
mean?
what can you do,
Like
dude?
with all like ignore all context and like and preconceptions about what happened, Alan, the company, just like what could God write to get us all to change our
What it
mind? And I don't know. Like it would have to be so extraordinary to like turn and if
Al
we get like a fucking laced fucking statement to convince everybody, then like of course it'll continue. But my
dude,
thought is like
Alan comes out and he's just like, I've been doing the wrong dose on my medicine, for an entire year. I've actually just been. I just realized it now. I've been taking way too much. Don't listen to anything I said in the past few years.
so if he's if I think the most likely situation is I think uh his his credibility with the community and probably like Nintendo's, but maybe like a honestly like a bit less if I'm guessing is like irreparable. Like I don't
Hmm.
I think it's pretty much I think it's pretty much over and my my dark triad theory if you will is that I
Oh boy.
think some of the people sticking up for Smash World Tour and other events at Nintendo might now have like kind of the smoking gun to show the people up top who are a little more checked out that like see this was the wrong way and we were right to question this dude and now we need to figure out something new.
And
That's like my
I think you
that's like
think
my
that
real
the internal
weed
Nintendo
smoker
people
theory.
I think you think the internal Nintendo people don't like him, and I don't think that's true.
No.
No.
I think
Yeah.
they agree. I think there are people at Nintendo, albeit lower on the chain, that agree that Nintendo that the way Alan has operated the circuit and treated TOs has
Mm.
been poor and bad enough to warrant working with other people.
I know that's what they might have communicated to people in conversations. I do not believe that's what they genuinely believe. And that's what I'm trying to say. I'm saying that I think the whole design has been that he's the bad guy, and they're happy about it. Name and point, they'll say those things to TOs, like, man, it really sucks that he's doing that to you all. And then they'll come out with an IGN article that says we love this guy, right?
I
Like I just don't I cannot reconcile
I'll DM you.
both of
I'll
those
DM you.
worlds.
I can't say the next part. I can't say the next
All
part.
right.
I
How
have to
about
tell you why
this
I'm
then?
convinced.
I
We're
think I
talking.
know why you're convinced. I'm telling you, I think I know more, and there's a reason why I'm convinced that it's not like that. I think they
No, I'm
love the
more. I
fact
know more. No, I
I
know
know
more.
more.
Look, I'm just saying we have only oh wow we have 254 viewers. If we just tell all of them to not leak, we
No.
tell everyone listening to this podcast not to leak, but to sit on this information, I think you can trust them.
How about this? You guys can DM each other, have a pissing contest about who knows more. Let's talk about,
I
you
just
know,
think it's wrong to think that Nintendo doesn't love that this guy is like going around and being the fall guy for activities that they
Yeah.
historically are the ones doing. Like
Also,
Blur. It's
this is
worth a
also
what they
mention.
do. This is who they are.
Sassafras in chat. Your message is so funny because I think it's literally the opposite, and that message is hilarious. If you scroll up, you'll see it.
What does it say?
Sassafras 238. I literally think it's the opposite.
That's so funny,
That's
Sassafras.
isn't that so
That's
funny?
a great message because of how wrong it is.
Do you guys
I
want to
like it though.
enlighten the viewers who catch
Or the
this after it
listeners.
goes live?
No. I actually don't. I don't want to.
Absolutely
I don't want to go to. I don't
not.
want to have to live with the consequences of explaining that one.
Okay, shout out to our listeners over on Spotify and other listening apps.
So-
Just go to the Twitch VOD, find it. It's not that hard. Just put some work in. How about
Yeah.
this? I have a question, Blur. You talk about Alan and Panda as if they're intrinsically linked. Do you not think that there's any world where there's a force out and that they try to continue Panda? Is this the end of the Panda brand completely?
Yeah, probably. Maybe he could continue on being a team, like continue that part of the company. I can see people being like, "Well, I guess that's okay. All he's doing is giving money to players," and he's
You
just
think that
like
means that he still stays
he
there,
hits.
right?
Oh yeah, I mean he could be a team owner and still. I don't think people would be a little scuffed about it or whatever, but if he's playing our players, maybe we look past it. I don't know. I could see a world where you recover there. Event organizer time is probably done. And like he'd not only have to leave as CEO, he'd have to divest his interest, which I don't like. I don't see him wanting to do.
Hmm.
And my understanding is that he still has a majority interest in his company, so he'd have to make that decision
You don't
himself.
think he can just step down as CEO, not have to divest, and no one people forget.
I won't, and I Garnt am on shows like this. Aiden
True.
won't.
Okay.
Like lots of other people can freaking use rub two brain cells together and be like, "No, that guy still runs that shit."
I
Uh,
guess I'm just I think that I don't know. Something as big as Panda will not fight and do whatever they need to do to continue on? Do you think that this is gonna be the end completely?
I think this. I think this is so. I think this is the end of their ability to run Panda Cup. I don't know if it's the end of their company. It
yeah.
might be also the end of their company, but it's 100% the end of Panda Cup. That part I'm basically guarantee you at
Mhm.
this point. That thing is dead as a doornail.
They
What
rebrand as
about stuff like
Koala, go into
their
the
stuff like
FGC
PG
more.
stats? Is that in danger?
PG stuff,
They're
it's so low
the
on my priority, but yes, I think that's in danger as well.
I think the thing is that there's so many people in Smash who are so just, like, against being a scab, which is great. At least, like, vocally, right? That you've heard Cody say, like, "Oh, yeah, if, like, this turns out to be true, I would leave," and then you like for whatever it is, like TK looking for like doing job applications on stream, whether or not that's a joke. Like it's very clear that this has affected people who are
Mhm.
affiliated with Panda. Like didn't like Walt made a statement even though he's just like a contractor.
Oh,
Like
this
people
sucks
who
for them. Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. This sucks for a lot of people.
yeah, no, this and that's a good thing to mention when we're talking about all this. Is that Alan has been kind of the lightning rod for a lot of this, and even then, like we've talked about, we don't actually know the whole story. I'm not backing him up, but I'm just saying like we don't know that he was like the most malicious Disney villain ever. he might have just been like,
I think
like Thanos believed in what he
yeah,
did.
we don't need to like I don't think that I'm in the camp of like not blowing him up like
Yeah,
personally and starting
Yeah.
like literally the fuck Allen hashtag and stuff. I don't
yeah,
like stuff like that. But also it's like intentions or not, mistakes or not, this is where we ended up.
The
And somebody
consequences. Yeah.
somebody is responsible for it, right? It's either Allen or the company he chose to get in bed with that we saw a bunch of red flags with for a long time. And like
Yeah.
I don't think I really like it, as far as the ends go, I don't really care about the intentions because it's landed in this position where we have to be fearful about the future of the game.
Yeah.
Yeah,
right.
I mean, this is one of those things where unfortunately, like, because the scale of whom this is impacting is pretty big, and because it's potentially like, like potentially like killing of our ability to sustain the way that we want to do. It's almost like it's not even relevant, like the what his personal character is like.
It's
It's
Yeah.
not
more
relevant, and frankly, like I don't even think it's true, right? Like I said, I do think he did it with a genuine intentions to grow the scene. He was just wrong and had the wrong methods, a bit naive, and
Hmm.
those all we really need to know in order to make our decision, whatever decision we make, is like, is this guy the guy that should be running, events and large
Yeah.
circuits for Smash going into the future and representing us to our publisher? Answer to that, it seems to be a pretty clear no. As far as him as a person, like I've talked to him plenty of times. It's not like he's like punched me in the face, like
Yeah.
like it's
yeah.
I
that's
th-
not really what any of us are saying. It's and frankly, I think that he had a very hard job cut out for him, but ultimately he took on that responsibility, and a lot of people are paying for it. Like Gimmer is absolutely hosed for this. There's
Yeah.
all of his people in his staff.
They might
There's
lose their
every
fucking business
organizer.
over this. I think it's like even if it's a
Yeah,
rogue, it's like there's this small possibility in my mind, right? It's like Allen's decision making has like maybe negligible impact on all of this. The lower level Nintendo employees that were being communicated with the whole time meant what they said, and at the last minute, some rogue Nintendo exec saw this, came in, and was like, "We got to get this cleaned up stat." It doesn't really matter because that's like the most generous version of like
Mhm.
what could have happened to me. And if even if that's the version that did happen, that executive represents Nintendo going back on like a year's worth of messaging and jeopardizing the business of one of our most important like community organizations, and also the businesses and like tournaments and enjoyment of the rest of the community that like
Yeah.
participate in it. So it like doesn't it almost like all the details of how we got there, it's like sure they shape my opinion a bit and like it does matter, but you could remove all the context and like give them that most generous scenario and it's still bad. And I
The end
still don't
still
result.
ever
bad.
want to
And
The
by
end
I
the way,
result doesn't
still
change.
I still will boycott. I still will
I still will
boycott.
boycott even the most generous scenario. And I
Mhm.
want to say everything I just said a second ago, which was extraordinarily generous, probably more than this whole situation deserves, right? Um, Even with that, I'd like to say the other half of it is that he made all these decisions where he'd rather see the scene burned down for a chance to get what he wanted, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which was,
Yeah, like
and
he
that
had to
is,
make that decision.
and that is really terrible, right? And ultimately, like he didn't listen to anyone along the way, right? I tried so hard. I was on a phone call with him for hours. Like, do not do Nintendo. Do not do Nintendo. Do not do Nintendo. Didn't listen to a single word I said, right? So let me say, like, if that's the spectrum of the most generous take, if you want to even it out, he really messed up, right? He really messed up, and a lot of it can be easily seen as malicious, going after
Hmm.
people, all that stuff. It's super bad. So whatever he puts out, I don't want people to take the generous take and be like, well, maybe it wasn't so bad after all. Like, no, for real, guys. Like that,
Well, it's like even the
you can't
generous.
come back from
It's
this.
like
You
it's
can't
like
come
the
back from
gener.
this.
It's reached a point to where like whether it's a generous take of it or bad take, it's like it's almost like I don't even want to. It's like whether I know or not is not is like that doesn't change anything. Like we're still here.
Yeah,
It's
how
still
about
a
we
Yeah.
worse
just don't?
End
situation.
result's exactly the same. This is what
eh,
happens when you get into bed with Nintendo. But yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Well, I want to pivot from Alan because
sure.
we talked
Wait,
about him a
can I
lot.
just like can I mention one last thing?
Yeah, you
Because
like his beard. Tell
no,
what
no,
what are you gonna
because
say?
I'm gonna bring this up in
He's
regards to
got
the
a
Melee
funny
Stats
last
Top
name.
100 all time thing. It'll be fast, but it is very, very funny, and I think a nice like microcosm of the way that just in my opinion, what seems to be the way that this guy conducted himself
Okay.
professionally. So two of his other stated reasons for why he did not want to exclude band players in the scene who had like literally assaulted people or like had sexual misconduct or whatever. His two reasons that he presented to me, other than like the stuff that, or the two reasons he presented me were that one, Panda was a family friendly company with a family friendly brand, and the second reason was that they wanted to, he was explaining this to me that he thinks an all time list should be focused on statistics. This
So
is what
so
he's trying to
a
explain to me.
family friendly brand would benefit from having sexual
We
assaulters.
look, we said we were gonna
Yeah.
move on
We're
from
gonna pivot
That was just the
towards
last
it.
thing I
right?
wanted
Because
to.
I
I'm not
really
even
don't think
mad. I just think it's
I
funny in
just I
hindsight.
just think like ultimately it's
That
I
is
don't
very
want
funny,
I don't
Edwin.
want that to be what the takeaway from honestly this entire kerfuffle to be. Let's make something absolutely clear. Like people are asking like who's to blame, Panda or Nintendo? The answer is both. Panda for
Yeah.
bringing the demon onto us, and Nintendo for being the demon. They are the demon. Never forget, they are the demon. And I think like I really hope. I don't know how many lessons it takes. I don't know how many times we have to go through this for people to understand that like our relationship with them, we should really treat it like an abuser, like antagonistic.
Yeah.
Like it has to be that way going forward. It's been too many years,
But
too many
Blur, they've
cases.
changed.
It's not even
They're
about them
working on
changing. It's that their
themselves.
interests are directly competing with our interests. It is not a
Yes,
marriage
I
that
agree.
can work. It's not possible. You can't make a deal where it truly works for both of us. I've thought about it so often. It's like I just don't think it's genuinely possible.
I mean,
What the community wants
yeah.
out of its tournaments, what it wants out of its competitive scene, is diametrically opposed to what they want. Like they are not the same thing. They simply want a different world and vision for the scene that we do, like universally, like across every issue, from commentary to how sponsorships are done to how tournaments are run. You could go down the list. Everything they want is different than what we want. So how is that going to ever work? The answer is it probably won't. And so like you really can't exist in a world where we like look at something like a potential, like let's say another guy like this comes out and says, I'm gonna really make it work this time. Like we can't really come in with that same
I
naivety that we did last time.
I have a question for you.
Go ahead.
What do you think? Like, I was trying to answer this for myself. What do you think Nintendo's reason is for wanting to get involved and license all these events at all? In my mind, the only thing I could think of was like IP protection. Like, basically, by having a hand in tournaments, they might be able to control like the more dangerous headlines that have like circulated in association with Smash in the past few years. And they don't want like something like sexual predators being at the top of an article next to like Mario and Peach. And like to them, having every tournament licensed is like a path to like controlling that messaging or controlling that scene. What other reasons, or do you agree with my reason, like as to why Nintendo wants this control at all?
So I watched a bit of your stream. It was fantastic. You were very handsome, very eloquent. I was very proud of you.
Thanks.
He's
Yeah.
still
And
in this
the only
episode,
thing
he's still handsome and eloquent.
Yes. The only thing I even slightly disagreed on, this is more of a nuance point to begin with, is that I don't remember if you said this exactly, but something along the lines of like, oh, like they don't care about, our growth or like
Yeah.
basically I think the Nintendo internal teams, Nintendo versus in particular, really cares about the Smash scene's future. I think they actually do care. Now, here's the thing. They care about it under their control with their IP and with their vision for the scene being implemented. They really do care about that, right? And the reason I say they care is because there are full-time employees who that is their job, right?
Mhm.
That is
Yeah.
their actual occupation, and I've just been on way too many email chains between all these different people, between Japan, between
Those are
America, between
those
all
are the
the
people those are the people that I think care too, right? But there's like some group of people above them that I think don't care about the small details like they do. And I
Um,
I wonder, like, why would a
I think those
Nintendo of
people will,
Japan person
yeah,
or
yeah.
why would Doug Bowser give a shit about Big House having a license? I that's the thing that I do not understand.
I think what they care about is making sure that this very large look, we are way bigger than we sometimes make out. I know we're small, but ultimately, millions of people in total watch Smash Brothers events in esports every year. We're not maybe a top four esport, but we're like number six or seven. We're not bad, right? And we have thousands of people going to our events. It's not, and there's also going to be
Are
a
you
new
combining
Smash game
Melee
that
and
comes out
Yeah.
Ultimate
inevitably.
there?
Of course, because that's what matters. That's what matters, like, ultimately to them, right? Like
Yeah.
that is the number that matters. And so, like, we are this awesome opportunity to be a marketing vehicle for all the other games. Because if you just
Mhm.
look at Smash Brothers, right, like, it by design so perfect to be joined with, whatever new game or no IP comes out.
Yeah.
Like, oh, we have a new Splatoon game coming out. Awesome. We have Splatoon characters in Smash Brothers, right? It
Yeah.
literally works like beautifully with their marketing strategy because every Nintendo game, every new Switch game is already being marketed inside Smash Brothers the game. Like
Yeah, isn't that the
it's
idea,
perfect
like, why
synergy.
so many of these, like, third-party companies are so excited to have their character in the game now because
Mhm.
it's a
Yeah,
giant advertisement of that character to a
absolutely.
young, huge, like, guaranteed to be huge audience.
And things like the invitationals they did, all this, these are not accidents. Like, these are legitimate investments by them. Those events have $1,000,000+ budgets, right? Like, they don't do stuff like that because we're unimportant. They do it because they think we're a legitimate marketing vehicle for their products and their game.
Sure.
And we are, right? Any competent developer would have completely,
Who would
invested in us by
trust it
now.
even more so.
Yes, would have come to that conclusion much more cleanly,
Yeah.
right? And the thing is that, like, so they really care, but they really need to be under their control. They want to make sure it's done in the way that they want, and we know the way they want. That we've seen Nintendo versus events. You guys have watched the invitationals. You guys have watched the little online Nintendo versus events, and what kind of broadcast that they
Yeah.
like. You see it. It's right there. It's in front of you, right? That's what they want, right? That is ultimately like the vision and the type of scene that they want.
Yeah.
Um, and they want Smash to kind of get molded to the point where
Mhm.
that is presentable to their leadership, right? So basically, someone like Panda's perfect, right? Because right now, what they have is they have a hard time selling their leadership on giving them budget to invest into the Smash scene, right? Like, how can you tell your leadership, I need $5 million every year from this point forward
Yeah.
to invest into Smash Brothers esports, and then they look at the broadcast and it's, us gooning around, right? It's not what they want out of it. So they can't get that initial funding.
Yeah,
So when
that,
some
like, disconnected, maybe peripherally understanding of esports executive is still looking for that kind of, like, sports-esque, ESL-esque broadcast
right,
that,
they
like, we
need
aren't necessarily doing, but also internally understand isn't even necessary.
right, because the truth of the matter is that that broadcast would suck. But anyway,
Yeah.
like, we know that, but they don't know that, right? And so they want to use someone like a Panda. This is what I actually told Alan this. I was like, "You're just a stepping stone, bro." Where they come in with upfront money. They do all the hard work, which is the upstart, right? They make the rule sets, they make the overlays, they get the TOs together, they make the TO agreements, which are always challenging. They set up the sponsorship parameters, they get the initial sponsors in, all this hard stuff. Setting up a circuit is way harder than maintaining a circuit, right? Um, I know this because when I worked at Twitch, Twitch made RLCS, and then Psyonix later took over.
Yeah.
Twitch made Tekken World Tour, made Capcom Pro Tour, made Dragon Ball FC Pro Tour. I was involved in all those, and guess what? The developers took over eventually for literally every single one I just listed, right? And the thing is that that upstart is by far the hardest part. But what happens in 3 years? Couldn't they just yoink it, right? They can just be like, "Hey, awesome stuff you built. We're gonna take all those documentation, all that stuff,
Dude.
yoink it, because we just presented it to our bosses, and now he's willing to give us 4 million a year,
Dude,
right?"
I haven't even thought about this part. You're so right. All of
That's what
those
they
circuits
want.
got
It's
taken over, dude. I
yeah.
forgot.
That's
Like, I
that's the
didn't
it's
even think about
this
that
is like a
part.
normal esports how things are done. Is that the third parties come in, they fund it, they naively think that they're somehow going to be the one that
Dude.
wins in the end. And then of course the pub dev is the one that gets the genuine benefit because they're the one who has the ultimate control and the ultimate say. It's never going to be an equal partnership when the pub dev is the one that controls the IP.
Man, See,
Mhm.
this is when I'm reminded that Blur knows what he's fucking talking about, dude.
thank you.
This is
Once
one of
in a
those.
while, it shines through.
So that is like that's ultimately like the whole purpose of paying it for Nintendo. They love him
Uh,
for a reason. He's the inroad. They can't make the inroads, right? Because they are so like they can't come in and be like, hey, all these shows work with us. All this. They don't know everybody. They don't like
mhm.
have relationships, and frankly, they hate doing work. And so like having someone like Pan who knows the scene to do all the hard work of setting up a circuit, paying for it, which again, money they don't have because they can't get that approved, and then being able to flip it later is really like their ultimate hope and master plan with this, because it'll be so easy to convince an executive. Look at this broadcast. It kind of already looks like what we are going to do next year. Just let us do it now, right? Instead
Uh,
of using this third party, and you slash
uh,
the Panda name off and you just make a
on,
Nintendo.
on this revelatory note, have just received a call from my boss that I have to go answer. So I'm going to take off. I really appreciate your guys' time and your
Aiden,
guys'
no, I
insight.
appreciate your time.
Thanks for
Thank you
coming
so
on,
much for
Aiden.
being
Uh,
on.
catch you guys
Yeah,
later.
lovely as always. And yeah, we'll
Yes.
catch you around. I'm sure we don't need to talk to where you can follow Aiden. I think I think that one's
Mhm.
easy.
See you, man.
See, Aiden. How about this? We had a really good conversation there. This thing that's in my head. This is obviously not the golden goose that it was supposed to be, right? You talk about how it'll get yoinked in a few years. What we're currently seeing right now does not seem like anything worth yoinking. What's the future of Nintendo's involvement in the scene? Because we know at 2023 people are not very optimistic. But is it just going to be like this forever? Do we reach a point where it's just too far gone and they finally leave us alone? Like, what are we going to expect from this in the coming future?
Um, bro, if I knew, I would love to tell you. They're crazy, right?
True.
Um,
It's
they're hard to predict, aren't they? In some ways. In some ways, they're really easy to predict because we know their intentions. They just want control, right? Unfortunately, if you just use that basic thesis, you'd think that next year they're going to use this as a catapult to be like, all right, we're the bad guy. Sounds good. You're going to need a license, right? And they're going to use this fear angle even harder going forward. However, if Panda doesn't exist, this puts them farther away from their ultimate goal, which, like I just detailed, is
yeah.
being able to make the scene in the shape of their own image. Right? That's the ultimate goal. That's the end all be all of what they want out of all this. They want the control to be able to make it Nintendo friendly and make the scene an appropriate marketing vehicle for their product marketing arm. That's like the goal, right? And now this would be a huge setback. So if Panda doesn't exist, because Panda was supposed to be the people that help make that happen for them. And so they're probably really pissed about it, how everything's going down. And I'm sure we're going to see in whatever statement or whatever machinations they make that they're going to try to save Panda pretty hard.
Yeah.
It
Um,
won't work. It won't work, but they'll try. They already
so
tried. They tried literally. Nintendo never moves that fast. You saw that PR statement? That garbage PR statement.
well, it
Ah,
it worked. I saw people go, "Wait, so can Smash World Tour run?" It's like, wait
I
a second.
I say garbage, but like it makes people right. It makes a few people who don't know the issue basically double think. Like, wait a second, was it just a miscommunication? And that's
Did
exactly where they
Did
get
Gamer
you.
just destroy it all because he misread it? Did he?
Yeah, like that's you see, though that's
Is he
exactly what they wanted.
intentionally nuking it to get community goodwill and get rid of competition? Like that's
Yeah,
the kind
or
of
or
like
did he just nuke it because he didn't
wild
want to
stuff
pay
you
out the
hear.
pricing? Like the Nintendo wasn't the bad guy, it's Gamer. Like this is the line of stupid logic that they want the 14-year-olds on Twitter to take because they don't know what's going on, right? And the truth of the matter is, it's all baloney. Thankfully, SWT nipped it in the bud. They put out their own statement. What's crazy is they weren't actually lying on what they put out. It's really close to a lie. It's just insanely misleading, right? Um, they technically never CND'd their 2022 event. They just told them you can't get a license. And by the way, if you don't get a license, a bad thing might happen to you. Wag a finger, like, bro, come on, like, like,
I've got two
sure,
Yeah,
separate
the Grim
statements for you
Reaper
to
is
make.
knocking at your door.
Grim Reaper's
Yeah,
not at your door, but we never technically sent them a CND,
yeah.
right? Like, it's like,
Yeah, we never sent a
get out
C&D.
of
You're like holding a
here,
scythe behind your
yeah,
back.
bro, like, come
I'm just
on,
saying every
son.
tournament needs a it needs a license. That's all I'm saying. By the way, yeah, I hate to admit it, you don't have a license. Well,
and you're not
man,
gonna
And
I
get
those
won't.
one.
days are over where
And
you
those
Man,
don't
I
days
have to
are
won't.
worry
over.
about this.
Those days are over. Like get out of here, brother. Like I don't know. I just so that's clear, right? Like they're making last minute attempts to s- to. I don't think that was. I think that was far less about their reputation and more about trying to save Panda coming up with like the next 2 weeks.
Yeah,
Because in a world where SWT like they could be like, hey, Alan didn't actually shut down SWT. That wasn't on him. Like this Gimmer guy keeps saying, maybe the players don't boycott, right? Whatever. Because the truth of the matter is like Nintendo's going to be fine next year, right? We hate
yeah.
him, but like they're still the IP holder, right? Like they're going to
They're
be
gonna
fine.
put out Pokemon Fuchsia, sell 10 million
But I think
copies.
they're gonna go back to their old ways, and if Panda actually dies, they're gonna have to go back to square one and think of a new way to try to take over the scene, which is what they're gonna try to do again. And we just have to be
Blair,
resilient for that.
Blair, one thing I want to ask you just really quickly, because we've been spending a lot of time talking about like Nintendo, Panda, so the ramifications for the scene. But we talked about Smash World Tour a little bit, but I want to go back to like, because I think for a lot of newer people in the scene, like especially specifically with Melee, I think they may not have the full context of like VGBC and just really like how long they've been around through Smash. So something I wanted to kind of get your thoughts on is, we know that this is the end of Smash World Tour, like as we know it. What does this mean for just like VGBC's long term future? We mentioned that their events are going to be shut down for the 2023 and the, as far as what we know. But what about like their future, just like ever being involved in Smash? What are the factors that go into this?
They might be done. I can't say. I don't want to say that prematurely because I really don't hope it happens. Obviously, and I think it's really hard for them to like. Let's say they organize a pound, right? The good news
Mm,
about Pound is it's at
Well, they own the
Xanadu.
venue.
They own they have a good relationship with the venue, which is the horse track, right?
yeah.
Mhm.
And effectively, you might as well say they own the venue because
Yeah,
that's
I guess
how
it's a little
that's the
complicated.
situation that they're in, right? It's the Xanadu venue. So if an event's gonna get canceled, Pound being canceled is not so bad, right? Because it's like canceling a Xanadu. It's still not quite the same, but it's not like in the hundreds of thousands of hours, $1,000 in the same way. And at least it could maybe be a way for them to dip their toes to see like, are they going to really go after this?
Hmm.
They're not really. I don't expect a future where they're going to be able to get a Nintendo license after everything that just happened, right? I don't see that future realistically. And I don't think Nintendo's going to want them on a Panda Cup if Panda Cup somehow survives, right? So, which is just seems very unlikely, but let's just leave the option open. And so, I think that they have a hard position where I think maybe they'll try, especially with like a pound, to see if it's still doable, and it's kind of like a wait and see moment to see if they get shut down. If Nintendo is truly serious, but anything unlicensed, um, you know, will get shut down. Anything big that's unlicensed, any major that's unlicensed, then they might be one of the first to find out.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Oh, man. Yeah, this is just such an interesting time. I can't believe it's so hard to believe that what happened yesterday happened, but we've been around long enough in this community to know the history, know that this is a thing, and I guess just have to accept this going forward. Yeah, I mean, what happens, right? If a tournament runs, they don't get the license, they run and like how scared do you think we have to be? Are they gonna C and D everyone, and then are they gonna follow up on everything that they C and D? Are they gonna sue every single TO that's in it? I mean, even if they do it once, I guess it's not worth it for anyone. That just implicit threat.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's I normally would say, yeah, no, I doubt it, right? Like, and I still kind of feel that way, right? Like, are they really gonna go after everyone
Well, it just feels
everywhere?
unbelievable, doesn't
It
it?
feels unbelievable. We are, of course, like a day out of them doing that to our literal biggest organizer of all time. So, you know,
Well,
Maybe
but in this
maybe they
scenario,
are crazy. Maybe they are crazy. But at the
in this
same time,
scenario,
like,
what if Smash World Tour was like, okay, we're not going to get the license,
yeah,
and then continue to run, right? Yeah, I guess this the
uh,
question
uh,
I'm asking is,
it,
what
it
if
could
we
also
don't listen?
it could also be, and we have to kind of figure it out that like modding is something they're very particular about.
Yeah.
Sorry, fans of Frozen Stadium in chat, but like this might not be the time, right? This might not be. I like Frozen Stadium too, but this is not the time. I hate to tell you all this. Um, and the so they don't like modding, they don't like, we know the general things that they strongly dislike and they've shut down events for in the past, right? Maybe circuits are another fucking line in the sand for them, where they're like, you can't do circuits without talking to us, just period, right? Um, Bit of a bummer. We kind of That's like one of our best vehicles for growth, but that might be the case. Now we've run most of our 21-year history without a circuit, so I guess we can just go back to the caveman days and not have circuits again. It's not like those two circuits were adding a lot to the general storyline of the scene. They
No
were
one
adding a lot of
understood
money.
what they did, and
Yeah, until
how
Right.
like
you got in.
until the very end.
Not to say I
Until the
wasn't
very
especially
end, and then
grateful
when it got shut
of
down.
SWT, right? Like, I think there was, like, especially a lot of international scenes that got some
Yeah,
exposure, and there's a lot of good prize pool. Like, don't get me wrong, I'd rather have a circuit than not have one, right?
yeah, yeah.
But I think we can survive like we have for most of our history without one. And so, if that's their line in the
Necessary
sand
time.
and they're not just gonna shut down every unlicensed event, then now we know another rule of the ball game. The horrible thing is every time they add a rule to their list, someone has to take a hit because like we only know what their rules are when they shut us down. So
Yeah, and I mean, in this case, it's like the entity that got shut down is literally like the long, like when you think of Smash throughout like the last decade, like it's literally the group that has been there since the beginning. Like, frankly, the group that was played one of the biggest roles in getting
by the
people
way,
like me and Wheat into melee.
the insert color hawk actually asked a great question. Is theoretically you could, even if they are circuits are aligned in the sand, you could very easily just run a circuit and even potentially sell sponsors against it, but you don't necessarily need to, by just doing a tennis style live ranking, uh, and having that, basically having like your rankings be your quote unquote circuit,
It's
right?
all about the
You
ranking
wouldn't
with
you
you.
wouldn't have you wouldn't have a final,
You
which
you
is,
hate the rankings so much.
yeah. Well, maybe if they weren't so bad, I'd like them more.
If
Um,
if they weren't so biased against HBox, is what I heard.
okay, I didn't say that at all.
Now that Panda's gone, we can kill this biased HBox panel ranking.
Yeah.
Give us an
Uh,
algorithmic ranking.
so yeah, I'm not asking for an algorithm. I'm asking for the tennis style, but and I have for years. But like, yeah, like something like that is something that could be done. Is that you just do it with no final? It's not nearly as sexy because if a final, I think, is really cool. We can't do large scale broadcast rights and sales conversations if that line in the sand is drawn,
Yeah.
as it seems to be. But it at least lets us have a story for our scene, and it lets us still run some events.
Well,
That might be the new world we live in, and that's all that really ends up happening out of this. In which case, a lot of unlicensed events will be able to run.
we have like a very small version of a de facto circuit finale every 6 months or so, which is Summit, which the
Sure.
circuit is getting be good enough to get invited and then going to whatever tournaments they choose. They've obviously main stage has a lot of spots. They've done Big House, DreamHack. They've had all these different things. Like that is not fundamentally too far off from a circuit, right? Maybe with this you start there. What if Summit 16, because we already know what Summit 15 is. Summit 16 maybe has one qualifier at each tournament for like six different tournaments, right? Is that not a circuit? Um, yeah, no. This is a definitely a very interesting idea, and yeah, I don't know. I've heard someone in chat say hopefully this was very annoying to Nintendo, and they decided to leave us alone completely. Probably not a scenario that will be coming out of this, but one that I would be very open towards.
Well, I mean, that's the frustrating thing about this, right? If they literally just left us, they
Just
didn't give
let us
anything.
go. Yeah,
They just left us alone. We would love it. Can you like we were actually in a good like in an all right position with these different independent spots. I mean, we had Blur here about like what a year ago. It feels like a year ago, where Blur was saying, yeah, you know, Melee's actually an incredible like pound for pound investment, and like you're seeing it in the ways that all these other organizations are starting and getting involved in the scene and actually growing an audience. That's the frustrating part. If they literally left, you know, the community to its own devices, like this was all manageable. It was looking upward.
You know, but again, like just they're not here, but I'm telling you, the way they hear that phrase, we love to say that, right? Like, just let us play our game. Let us, leave us alone. And I agree, by the way, of course. But what they hear is, let us monetize your IP and leave us alone. Let us just do that.
hey,
We're
look, dude,
like,
we're not even gonna buy. You can't even sell us
that's
our game anymore. Just let us play it.
the way they see it is events are selling ticket sales
Yeah,
based on their IP, selling sponsorships, selling broadcast rights based on their IP, and they're like, who are these people? Who are these random kids on the street who are doing that, and why aren't we getting a cut? And that's just the way they see it. So I disagree. I think it's a bad way to treat your customers.
of
It's
course.
lame. It's lame. But even if you see it that way, you could handle it better than they have, which is
Yeah.
just being douchebags.
Well, I'm sure if we all got in touch with our inner scar, we could go on a monologue about how living in an inherently capitalistic society will always lead to this. But because we're just little piggies to be sold to. But yeah, how about this? We're coming down to the end of the episode.
Yeah.
Is there a hopeful way of ending this conversation? Is there anything positive that we can look
What
at from
happened to
this?
Mikey?
Dude,
Mikey's in chat, not doing anything.
he's busy. He's waiting for my ass so we can finish
Mikey,
main stage.
Mikey, do like 5 minutes on the show.
I end this
Yeah.
podcast and
I
then
want to
walk
make
my
Yeah,
main
ass
Mikey,
stage
come
over.
through.
big.
Come
I've
through.
done more for main stage than you have, and you're the freaking TO. Come on now. Get on here. Someone get Mikey on here.
Oh my god, where do I go? Mikey, you're in the chat.
Like, oh my god.
I love
Oh my
Bobby Scar.
goodness.
I want to watch that VOD of whatever he said.
It was
Uh,
really funny.
really funny.
I'll be honest, I don't even remember the thing that he was angry at you about.
I didn't watch the beginning, and I think that's when he covered it most. So I don't know either. But
I think he said that he thought that you were being doomer, which you don't appear to be very doomer on this show. And I remember
well,
watching them
here's the
live.
thing.
That
That
just
was an
might be.
hour.
He
Yeah.
might come off like that, Edwin, because you are more doomer than he is. You might not see that he is a doomer because you are just more doomer.
Also,
Why?
I think it's crazy when people are like, "Bro, you seem doomer." Where I'm like, "Bro, we just lost 2/3 of our events. Like, is that? Am I?"
Well,
Just-
that's a
They're
yeah,
doomer
like,
the,
"But
the
we
positive
figured."
body is
question.
next to us.
It's like, they're like, "Why are you such a doomer?" As I just saw like two of my family members get killed. I'm like, I don't know, man. Like, it seems, the shit seems pretty
They're
bad.
lying on the ground like next next to
I'm
us.
just trying to give people an honest take. And the honest truth is, this is really bad. I also had said, even in that show, I think we will persevere because that's what we do. We will win. We
We've
will
been here
win.
before,
We've been here
somewhat.
before, and we will solve this. And frankly, this will just be another story, chapter in the book. But
Audio on OBS Ninja. What's going on?
We do audio
What's
and
going on,
visual. You
Mikey?
just
All
didn't
right,
turn
hey,
your
man.
whatever.
camera
I
on.
don't have it. Well, I don't have a camera. I'm at the office.
Oh, okay.
I'm
Well,
here.
Ooh.
um,
I'm locked in.
let's
Wait, at
get our
8
producer to
p.m.
slap a picture of you.
LB, think about workers' rights, bro.
It's fine. I could go back to the hotel.
Uh huh.
I'd rather work on a dual monitor setup.
Okay, no need to
And
brag.
wheat is keeping me from finishing constructing this bracket.
I was trying to end the conversation, and then someone called out one of our lovely chatters and said, "Get your ass in this
All
call."
right, what are we
Blair,
talking
what's your
about?
Blair? What did you need Mikey here for?
Mikey.
Mikey, we need some optimism. We've been talking a lot about Panda, Nintendo. I don't
No, I
trust
don't care
Blur
about
to give
optimism.
optimism.
Mikey, what is
I
your
would love some optimism
honest
before we
truth?
go.
Yeah,
I want where his head's at.
Mikey, you gotta
Where's
help
the
us out
cheat in
here.
all this, bro? What is
Um,
what's the cheat take on all this, bro?
I think that unfortunately, in a bit of an ironic twist, when things like this happen in the community, it actually tends to be a bit of a growth opportunity.
I agree.
Um,
Mhm.
which I think we kind of have to uh, take into
Okay.
consideration here. I don't know. I think Bobby's right in large part that I think your existence in this community has to almost be like a form of protest now, and kind of like mutual aid in a way, where like you um it's almost like political now, you know, and if you didn't see that before yesterday, then you have to now. Like,
Mm.
Yeah, God, I hope so. But how long was it between Big House Online getting shut down and Panda Cup announcement? Was that like a year, like 12 months maybe?
I think even less than that, right?
And yeah, I mean, it doesn't. The communities doesn't like. We're all like, oh, Nintendo's helping us out.
I
Uh,
know, and the goalposts have like continued to shift, and you know, I think this one's a little bit different because it's not just like, oh, well, you know, this one was running online or this one had PM or you know, even in this case, this one has like Smash in the title and it's a circuit of events, but like also the additional information coming out about the streaming rights thing uh is I think a pretty big deal here, and I think it's kind of setting off alarms for people in a way that things haven't before. Um, and I think people are kind of seeing the writing on the wall a little bit that, like, oh shit, this might just happen to like normal events. Where does the line get drawn? Like, it, is there going to be some sort of arbitrary ceiling where like your event can't be this profitable or this big without needing a license, and then what are the implications of that? Like there's so much uncertainty when it comes to that right now. Um, but I do think that people recognize that, to the credit of the Melee community at large. I think the response has been like fairly appropriate, to be honest. So that makes me a little bit happy, you know, that we at least recognize this for the
Right.
you know, the threat that it is, and we've uh, you know, done the one thing we can, which is blow it up on the internet and make
I
things as hard for like the people who are doing this as possible.
Yeah, it is a reassuring idea that when this stuff happens, we don't stay quiet, right? You know, we obviously speak up. We've done it every single time. But it is worrisome that like sometimes the community needs moments like this to feel this way.
Right. Yeah.
And
Mhm.
this should be our default emotion, right? Is that we should
The
always
biggest bright side of everything here is if you just want to go as Blur's words gospel, which you probably should, and you just
Hmm.
go back a year, right? And
Hmm.
I told, and Edwin asked me, Blur, what's the worst case scenario?
do an
I
impression of
said,
him asking you that.
Blur, what's the worst case scenario?
I don't sound like that. I sound
And what I
nothing
You
like
tell you,
made
that.
your
Edwin,
you
That's
made your
cap.
voice deeper. Just
Edwin,
Blur, I do not sound like
I
that.
know you know my words. Like go to sleep thinking about them. What did I say? What was the response?
I think I will give you credit. You said something like this that would immediately
Okay,
fracture the
now you have
scene
to
and
do
lead to.
you have to do an
No, no,
impression as
no, no,
well.
no. That's not what I said. I said the worst case scenario, ironically, is if they do a good job. Good news, they didn't do a good job,
Hmm.
right? Here's the reality. In a way, obviously SWC we shouldn't be happy about,
Is that what you
but
said to me?
yes, Edwin,
That was
you're
not
supposed
last
to
year.
remember.
Maybe early. Whatever.
No,
Edwin,
that's
I think he's lying to you. Don't trust him.
I'm not. Look, anyway, forget about that. Let's back to the brass tacks. The worst case scenario was always if they do a good job, right? If they did a good job, we would be with Nintendo. Like Nintendo would be so far up our rectums, we couldn't get them out, right? If competence was like if Mikey was running Panda and didn't do any of this F stuff, they would have won, right? Like if a lot of people, a lot of different people were actually at the helm of this same project, right? This same general idea at this point of our history, they would have succeeded because they would have had more sponsors going into next year. They would have had the Nintendo hammer at all times. They wouldn't have burned all the bridges because they wouldn't have done all the stuff that Alan did, right? And they would have gradually gotten more and more of the ecosystem under their control, just for Nintendo to eventually pull the rug and take the power for themselves, right? And we'd have got even closer and closer that Nintendo future that we all want to avoid, right? So I think, like, in a way, if the end result of this means that there's no Panda Cup, and like ultimately like that Panda Cup as a structure would have been so bad for the scene long term, which I believe from the start, as you guys seen many times, a lot of the questions I've said from the beginning. Like we would be stuck in a world where we would have no rev share for our sponsorships and no way of changing that because we have the IP holder effectively like down our throats. We'd live in a world where like there's one entity, an esports team of all things, who run our rankings, who run our who run our our final event, and we just kind of got to join their circuit and kiss the ring, or else like we potentially might get shut down. Like the world that it would have built up to would have been so bad, right? Again, if they did a good job, that it's actually kind of great that this thing might just go down in flames, right? Like in a way, them doing a bad job and it going down in flames is dope. Really, really lame that so many people have to suffer as a result, right? Obviously, but maybe that part is part of the healing, right? Um, and so I that's honestly like even just a couple months ago, that's what I was worried about. Mikey knows. I was like, bro, what if they just win? I was
Yeah.
worried about them winning that scenario, and I'm no longer worried about that. And that part's nice.
Yeah, you were popping off when I DM'd you that they had 46 entrants in their LCQ.
Mm-hmm.
I was like,
You did
hey,
tell me you thought they were the favorites and at Big House.
and turns out, for no reason whatsoever, SWT getting canceled was the thing that does them under. So.
Yeah.
I do want to like kind of pick your thoughts on something. This might be a little
Blur's
granular, but as
thoughts?
far
Pick Mikey's thoughts. He
Pick
came on
Mikey's
here.
thought.
Yeah, he
it
came
can be
on
the
here.
Yeah.
collective. It can be the collective your sure or
Oh God!
Mikey.
No,
Yeah.
no, no. If you don't say it's for Mikey, Blur's gonna take it all. That's just how it works.
All right, Blur. Thank you very much. I appreciate your contributions.
Yeah, goodbye, Blur.
Kick
Mikey,
him off.
I don't know if this would be like something that tournament organizers would think of necessarily as like a viable alternative, but just like if um if like streaming becomes really dangerous and this same comes for like monetizing off the stream, like what other revenue areas or like ways of or just like ways of running an event could you make money off of, or could you like possibly like raise like other than ticket prices? Like is there any
Yeah.
other way that like you would make money?
I mean, we could do crowdfunding. Um, I don't know. That's asking quite a lot for kind of the
Mm-hmm.
scale of, frankly, what we've been able to accomplish recently.
Yeah.
I don't know if that would get us sort of back to that level, but we at least might be able to do something where we're kind of able to operate major tournaments. Um, even if we're not able to like grow them through a huge influx of money or anything like that. I think that's kind of a viable option. And I don't know, it's kind of interesting, like there are models. I think it's kind of analogous to some like music YouTubers actually are like just raw playing music in their videos, and instead of like monetizing through YouTube, they just monetize through Patreon
Mhm.
instead, basically. Now, how we carve that up is obviously a huge question. right?
We take the yard
Um,
Patreon and we all get 1% of it.
there we go. That's how we fix it.
We just
Dude,
we
I'm so
turn
far away from even like considering the thought in my brain that we won't be able to stream our game. That I have a hard time even entertaining that world because I'm like, we start doing that and like I don't know. I'd rather just go to the Seattle office and organize a protest right outside. You know,
Yeah,
like
it's very
let's go where Doug Bowser can see us, bro. Like at
I don't
that
know.
point, like I'm over it.
They're
Blur, I'll meet
weighing
you there.
like obviously there is a bit of an interest in protecting your IP from being used in ways that you don't want it to be, even I guess with a 20-year-old game. And they're like within their legal right to do that, obviously. But um, I don't know, and this is, I think, the big question that a lot of this hinges on. I don't know the degree to which they value the protection of their IP over the sort of PR interest here. I do not believe that Nintendo wants to be involved in Smash for money. I don't think they can make money off of Smash, frankly. So I actually believe that their community involvement is, ironically enough, to make it so that people don't hate them in the community, primarily. Um, and you know, they want to control things to that end. I don't really see any other like reasonable explanation. Um, but how important is that, which is in shambles right now, versus protecting their IP? And they could just leave us alone if they don't value the IP over the PR here, you know?
Yeah, they're gonna value the IP more than any PR that we can put out, probably. I don't know though. We have a pretty loud voice. We definitely make them shook every once
I
in a
think
while.
I think it's a legitimate question. I have no idea what the answer is.
I don't know,
Yeah,
and
and I
I love to
don't
find
And
out
pretend
though.
to.
I
I love making noise. I love a good fuck
and
Nintendo moment.
I would hazard a guess to say that this is actually a difference of opinion within Nintendo, you know?
Mhm.
But who wins? It's really hard to say, I think.
Yeah, I mean
And
it's also I mean, do you think that I know this sounds crazy to say. Like, do you think like I thought when the big house thing happened, that people would respond to like a Panda Cup announcement, especially with being like, "No, bro, we just had them shut down one of our biggest, most storied events, and it was still going to happen, and people were still going to go to the Cup, right? Like ultimately, right when that
Yeah.
first happened. Um, do you think if someone else comes around, gets a Nintendo license to run a tour, basically starts fulfilling the Nintendo vision that they want? Do you think we finally reached a point where people are going to be like, "Hey, wait a second, no"?
Melee stats comes around. We're like, this is the
Even
perfect
I'm talking
opportunity.
about even with like a large prize pool. Like, are they
I
actually finally
think
going to say no,
I
man?
think what it would take for this to like go over okay basically is for every major player in the scene to make transparent the terms that were agreed to with the licensing, that we could demonstrably say, hey, here are X, Y, and Z things that we are going to do. And here's why these terms are different from what happened with Panda Cup. I think it would take literally every major TO co signing it. Um, and even then, I don't know if it's worth it. You know, like
Mhm.
we have kind of made it so that we're in a situation where our leverage is our tournaments dying. You know,
Yeah.
Yeah.
that is the thing that is the panic button option, right?
Right. And the crazy thing is, like, if we did any collective bargaining,
Wait,
that would be
I'm
our
sorry.
right.
Am I missing out on something? You're saying our leverage is that we like die and that people
Correct.
feel bad for us.
Yes,
Well,
correct.
Nintendo theoretically, Nintendo wouldn't want that to happen.
Because
Theoretically.
currently, I mean, the reason that a lot of this happened in the first place is that the deal that we are being offered is one that we just cannot agree to. It would be unconscionable to agree to it, you know?
Right.
And
So
I guess theoretically it could be better. It's just, can we ever trust Nintendo to get there? You know, can
oh,
is it
I'm not gonna trust
possible?
him. Let me tell you something. But
Yeah, and even if I don't know, even if we're
so
told one thing,
so the thing I'm basically asking is, um, you know, the are circuits as a concept possible to revive? Like, is that now gone? Because it sounds like running a circuit is just going to get you shut down by Nintendo. So you kind of have to work with Nintendo, which at this point seems very hard to convince the community that to be on board with. Let's say even if you do a light license with Nintendo, which is nowhere near what Panda, like the kind of involvement that Panda wanted. I don't know if Nintendo will want that light of involvement, right? First of all, just flat out, right? And then second of all, like you'd have to have again the gargantuan task of getting every tournament organizer to believe and like whatever relationship and agreement that you set up with Nintendo, which I find hard to do.
it would be an absolute mountain to climb, I
So
think.
just is our circuits as a concept not something we should entertain at this point? Like, is that just not going to happen?
Is that it's not even up to us at this point? I mean, I think we've all said that we're fine with circuits not existing, right? Melee doesn't need a circuit to exist.
You can have a
Smash World
good
Tour is a
ranking.
nice
That's what I'm
additive.
saying. A ranking is almost a circuit. It's just one that can't get shut down.
And we
Nice.
just need the weak Discord with all the players. He'll tell them how
Yeah,
important every
it all
gem
Yeah, I
is.
it
mean,
all comes down to wheat,
Blur is kind of
as
right
always.
here. Like, the main difference is that a final event doesn't really exist if we don't have a circuit. But is that a bad thing?
Mhm.
I
Our
don't
best
think it's a
years
bad
happened
thing.
without them. Yeah.
I mean, the truth of the matter is, even the circuits that we had, their final event wasn't like our championship, right? They were
Yeah,
just
thank
another
you.
major. They were just another major on our rankings,
I think
right?
that there will
So
be some people who talk about it differently, but it's like no, don't change the history. There's a Smash World
that
Tour. It is very unfortunate that we don't have it, right? This is a horrible thing to happen to the community, but this was also not the biggest tournament of the year. This was going to be probably a tournament that had a a lot of top players, right? It had people who Plup wasn't going, and you had a lot of people like lower down the rankings who weren't going. It's still a travesty for it not to exist, but yeah, don't get it twisted that this is not like five Genesises combined into one.
Yeah,
Which
right.
I think
yeah,
that
it wasn't even one
the story
Genesis,
might change at some point.
right?
But yeah, we don't. If it comes down to if it comes down to us, we don't need a circuit because we've existed without it. And as cool as Smash Roll Tour would have been, and as cool as it was last year, it is not
But
instrumental to us surviving.
what I'm really struggling with is, like, what's the path for growth here? I think
Oh,
I
that's a
think
hard question, Mikey.
I think I
Continue
can
though.
see a path for survival,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
But,
yeah.
like, I don't know. That, to me, there is so much wasted potential over the history of Melee, and it is kind of my job to help that come to fruition as much as possible.
Hmm.
Um, and you know, I, I'm just like, I am a person who thinks that Melee can be a lot more than it currently is, and I right now, I feel like we're in survival mode, and the path towards making something better is a little bit unclear at the moment.
I mean, we've been in survival mode our
Forever,
whole
the
yeah
entire time.
the 21 years,
Yeah,
right?
and you know what? Like, right now, the past, like,
It was clearing up. It was like,
it's
oh,
getting better. Yeah,
I was like, wait a second, we might grow. And now I'm like, oh, we kind of have to survive again.
yeah.
um, and so like you're right. The biggest question is like, okay, I can see the survival paths. Like, what if they just don't let us do circuits? Genesis keeps going. Maybe there's some light licenses, whatever. Nintendo's going to get up to it no good and try to come in again in some more onerous way. whether it's next year by licensing everyone or by partnering up with someone else, right? And who knows? Or maybe Panda makes a resurrection. Maybe Alan Bunny's behind it all again, right? I don't know, right? I can't tell you what the future holds. But like, I think the challenging thing is, even with all those that as a backdrop, like if Nintendo is going to be a hard stopper on like collective sales, especially, and collective broadcast rights, those are like extremely large money pools in the esports and sports ecosystems, right? And those would just be blocked us off from us forever. And so we're just kind of like the ticket sales people, and like we already have pretty freaking good attendance for esports, right? Um, so yeah, the answer is, we'd probably be similar to where we are now. And now the truth is, what we have been is pretty freaking dope. But the people, like, for transparency, for people to know, it's not going to be a career for anybody. It's going to be a lot of work, but not going to be a great career in that way. Maybe a handful of people like Mikey can work in places like Beyond the Summit to make it happen long term. But it's going to be tough to like really push the boundaries if those are real limitations that we're going to be stuck with.
Well, I think that we're running close to the end of the show. Is there any last things we want to say about this? I know that this is a very broad thing. There's a lot going on here. It's a very complicated issue. So maybe it's possible to kind of sum up.
What
But
one last point I want to make that could help us a lot.
yeah.
If someone out there just made a good platform fighter, that might help us a lot.
Hmm.
Like, no, seriously. No, that would help us a lot. Because one of the main problems we have is that right now, like what does the FGC have that we don't? They have leverage of like they have like 6 different companies that are vying for that tournament organizer attention, right?
Mhm.
And they're like, hey, we kind of have to do, like, Bandai has to beat out Capcom for who has to beat out Warner Brothers for space,
Yeah.
time, and attention at each of these FGC events, right? We don't have that, and we really are just the Nintendo events. And it has really sucked. So many of those type of games have come out, but if, like, let's say a Rivals of Aether 2 ends up being good, that would help our cards in the hand that we have a lot. It really would, because then we could be like, look, man, you can shut us out, but we're still gonna have Brawlhalla and Rivals of Aether 2 and maybe Multiverses get the real scene.
Blair,
And
I'm
be
not
like,
gonna lie.
yeah.
I think this is a little bit of cope. I think that there's just something about Mario Punch and Pikachu that people will not gravitate towards anything else. Not from our
Yeah.
community, maybe from Ultimate.
And this
But
is coming from a guy who ran a Nick All Stars Brawl major.
yes, I tried it. Got pretty good viewership. But
I mean, you're saying for Melee though? I think for Melee, if a really good platform fighter with Melee's mechanics came out,
I don't know.
I
People are just addicted to Melee. It's serotonin at this point. It's impossible to give up.
Yeah, there's
but even
something
if
like
that's true,
visually pleasant about
even if
Fox,
that's true, by
right?
the way, let's say we have a scenario where 2/3 of the entrants at a Smash major are Smash people, 1/3 of
Sure.
them are other games,
Sure.
right? That would still help our leverage a little bit. It would. It would help us a good amount, right? And
yeah,
if
I
it
get
gets to a world where it's like half and half, or even Smash is a third of our total floor space, they cancel Smash. That's their loss, bro.
Like if
That's
there like
their
if there's a
loss.
structured organization for like platform fighters or something similar to
Like
Evo
like if
or
Genesis had
yeah.
more than just Nintendo games, effectively,
Mhm.
right? If it was like, hey, it's also a big tournament for these other games, and then
Good thing
we would probably
Genesis
have a
9
better.
is running Rushdown Revolt.
very fun.
Are they? God
Yeah,
bless.
yeah, yeah.
Rushdown Revolt has a character in it that has one of the best platform fighter character designs I've ever seen. So give it some respect.
Cool.
They just added a new character, and I was like, this character's cool as hell. It's like she has a whip. She's Reina. She's like, she's
Hmm.
badass. You should check it
Hey,
out.
try it out, viewers
Mm.
at home.
No,
Uh,
seriously, it would actually help.
Yeah,
not
it would
Maybe
leaving.
the way out of Nintendo is stop playing their goddamn game.
play with the
Yeah,
girl
we're
with the
gonna play
whip.
Melee. Don't get me wrong, but like play other games also, so that we're less dependent on them. We're not gonna stop playing Melee. Don't get me wrong.
I have one final point.
Please, Mikey.
Devin Booker scored 51 points in 3 quarters
I
tonight.
knew you were gonna bring it up.
And Monty Williams didn't put him in the fourth quarter.
Dude, he could
51.
have had 70.
He could have
50.
done it again. Can
Well,
you
I mean,
imagine?
I was hanging out with the boys, and I just had a feeling that he was going to go for 50. And when he was at 50, I said he might as well go for 51.
Incredible.
51 in what, 31, 32 minutes? That's incredible.
And
Almost as
DA,
cool.
DA's
Uh,
got 30 and 16. Sorry, continue.
Joel Embiid once
30
got
and
50 points
16
in
for
27
no one
minutes.
plays
Wow.
defense in the NBA anymore. Like
Incredible.
NBA numbers just look stupid nowadays.
All right.
All
So
these scores are
we
like
have a
150.
segment where we talk about non-Smash stuff. Before we get to
Oh
that,
God.
30 seconds apiece. Who is going to win main stage? I think it's going to be Mango. Mango's going to win. He's going to say he should be number 2. And maybe he should. Maybe he'll even say he should be number 1. And we'll have to, all eyes will be on the Melee stats rank to figure out.
Everyone knows that no matter what happens in main stage, Zay is number 1. So
That
I hate to
doesn't
be the guy,
stop
but-
people from tweeting that they're number 1 after they win.
Could you at least lie to make the storyline better, Blur?
Yeah,
Blur.
no, sure.
Blur, who do you got?
It doesn't make
Please.
any sense, but
Who do you got?
Tune in.
Who's gonna win main stage? Wait, who's
Amsa,
going at this point?
Cody, maybe Leffen, who's severely jet lagged.
Mango? I'm gonna go with Mango. I just hung out with him last weekend. Of course, I'm going Mango. Mango,
Mikey.
Mango.
I think it's Mango.
All right. Edwin, you can either continue this or you can right your wrongs and finally pick Amsa.
I'm gonna go with H box. I think it's
Oh,
it's
God.
H God sweep
Oh, he's
time,
actually
and
thinking
I
about
don't
it.
think
He was
he's gonna
just
beat.
kinda saying stuff.
I think he's gonna win by like beating
Is he
Mango
muted? Am I
once in the
crazy?
grand finals, and that's it.
Great. H box. Cool. Before we go
You picked
here.
Xbox?
Yeah.
I'm gonna pick H
Oh,
box,
okay.
and I'm gonna say specifically that
Oh.
he wins in a really infuriating way. Like
Okay.
he,
This is
he
like
doesn't play a top 5 player until grand finals, and he beats Mango there.
I can't believe after this conversation we've been having for 2 hours talking about how much we love our game and how it might not survive, you're like, yeah, I hope the last event we have, it's just like HBox destroying Mango.
I never said I hope. I just said this
What's
is my
wrong with
guess. I
Xbox
just
winning,
see
bro?
this.
I
What-
think
what-
he'll
what-
I
what do
think
you-
he'll
what-
just
what's your
embarrass
problem?
Mango. And then
No,
I think
what's your
Mango's
problem,
gonna
bro?
rip his pants when he
What's
gets
your
forced
problem?
cock.
What's wrong with HBox winning? It's the H God, Clutch God.
Edwin
Yeah,
wants
that's what
it
I'm
to be
saying. I just
Edwin wants
know.
it to be embarrassing. He wants Mango to lose to HBox in an embarrassing fashion. It's not
Tube
only that
time?
Edwin doesn't even say that HBox
I
has
don't
to
want
win.
things to happen.
You just have a premonition. Great. Before we go here, we have a segment where we talk about what we do outside of Smash, which is a very funny thing this episode. It feels so totally different, but
Can
of
we skip
course,
that part? I got stuff to do.
you can do it first, and then just leave.
Okay.
Just it's
I don't have stuff to do. I'm just tired.
it's our unnamed segment.
Just trying to leave.
Me and Mikey have things to do, and then you called him in for an extra 30 minutes.
I love Mikey too much.
Blur, what have you been up to recently? I heard that you were on a trip this weekend.
Yeah, I went to Philly with Mango. We were fun. We went to an Eagles game. It was hilarious.
Did you
It was
tailgate?
awesome.
Just blast.
Not really.
Okay.
We were just
That makes sense why I didn't get contacted to come tailgate with you, though.
Go
yeah, no,
Birds.
we were totally us. Yeah, we were like he's got to be there.
Go Birds.
Go Birds. Hey, it was a good game.
It was a great game.
Go Birds. We
Go
had great seats. We had a great time. We were wasted. I had some Philly cheesesteaks.
I think that was like the 4th most rushing yards by a quarterback in a game ever.
Dude, MVP? Can we just
MVP?
say it?
Do I hear it?
MVP?
Any
Can we,
MVP.
any MVPs?
Mikey, what have you been up to recently?
Yeah, so Devin Booker scored 51 points tonight in 3 quarters against the
All right, I'm
Chicago
gonna end the
Bulls.
call. Bye.
Okay. Bye, Blur. Thank you. I guess I'll continue. I've been watching the 76ers, and they've been very kind of fun to watch because all of their good players are gone. Their 3 best players are hurt, and Joel Embiid has since come back, but they looked so bad and then started to win, which included a pretty embarrassing win over the Brooklyn Nets, which is very fun.
There we go.
Uh, gotta love that.
Edwin,
Um,
this is sports corner now, and I need you to tell me something about sports.
Edwin
We
loves
we haven't
sports,
we haven't mentioned the World Cup yet.
but fuck the World Cup.
That hurts me.
I I hate
Yeah, I haven't
footy.
followed the World Cup at all.
That hurts me.
I
Okay,
am
sorry.
going to
I
bring
know
up
that
something very.
I know you love
I
Qatar.
will bring up something in the World
I,
Cup though.
I love the
Beyond the
football.
Summit,
Okay,
Qatar.
Yeah.
what's up?
Okay. So I'm
Shut the
gonna.
fuck up.
So I was gonna bring up. I was gonna bring up the Patriots or whatever, but no one cares about that. The more bizarre interaction that I have with another family member that I will not name over the last week is that
You won't name your family
he
member.
was simultaneously very upset about, like, correctly, the rise of, homophobia and transphobia, naming them specifically, and like, like violence against LGBT people in America and stuff. But at the same time, in the span of a 10 minutes conversation, he flipped on a dime and just started defending Qatar. Like, just super
Hmm.
heavy. He was like, no, like Qatar, like this Qatari millionaire is like very misunderstood, and like people don't understand the that, like, this law and all this stuff, blah blah blah. Like, they're saying that, like, the laws here are homophobic, but
And he
like,
convinced you? This is what you're saying? This is what I've
no,
been
I was
getting
just
into recently.
baffled. I just
Qatar.
Oh,
no, I just was baffled. Like, literally on a dime, this guy went from, like, giving this impassioned, like, speech about social justice in America
All right,
to
well, this
suddenly
isn't
just, like,
Admin, this isn't
defending
story
Qatar.
time. This is sports corner.
Well,
well, it
it's kind
was
of related.
tangentially sports related. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of related. And it was the most insane thing. I didn't even know what to say. It just, like, completely caught me off guard. I was like, I've never like met a person in real life that was just like Qatar built.
All right, we
Like,
got it.
oh,
Connor's messaging me. We have to end this.
We do have to go. Main stage
okay,
has to
sorry,
be
sorry.
fixed. This is what happens when you care about the community, is that you do a 2.5 hour podcast with the Blur talks for 60% of it, if not more, and then spend 4 hours afterwards fixing pools for an event that you have to go to the next day. Anyway, thank you everyone for watching. Melee stats. I think this is probably, for people watching live, one of the first times that a lot of you have been watching. We do bi-weekly podcasts about what's going on in Smash, usually more focused on events itself. Obviously, this was very weird week, so we had to talk about what was going on. But if you want to follow us while we're live, twitch.tv/melee stats. We have episodes over on YouTube, the Melee Stats archive. We also put out like 30-minute short film style YouTube video essays, including one that is very pertinent to the situation at hand, the game Nintendo wishes it never made. If you want to hear more about Nintendo's history with the Smash community, that is a perfect example of a video that'll talk to you about that. So you can find those over at Melee Stats on YouTube, Melee Stats Pod on Twitter, and our website is meleestats.co. So you can find our articles over there. If you like our merch, including this flag hoodie that I'm wearing, meleestats.co/shop. And if you just love everything we do and you want to support us, patreon.com/meleestats. Thank you so much to everyone who's watching, especially all the first time people. And thank you so much for being on, and Blur and Aiden, I guess. And I guess all I have to say is, moments like these, it really makes you think, and I'm glad that I've devoted so much of my life to Smash, even if it might have been better if I had devoted 7 years to, I don't know, like finance or something. But I'm so happy to be here, and we will talk to you again. With everything that's going on, I don't know if we're coming back next week or if it's going to be the week after, but we will be back to talk to you about everything that's going on in Smash. Thank you so much for watching. Peace.
See you guys.